The rain fell mercilessly over New York City's streets, each drop a cold reminder of nature's indifference to human suffering. Through the downpour, a small figure darted between the shadows of towering buildings, her breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. 8-year-old Rose Thompson clutched her wooden box of handmade bracelets tightly against her chest, the colorful threads inside representing hours of work and, more importantly, hope for her sick mother's medicine. "There she is," a gruff voice echoed through the alley. "Get that little brat." Rose's heart pounded against her ribs as she ran faster, her worn sneakers splashing through puddles. 2 men were chasing her, local thugs who demanded protection money from street vendors. They had already broken her friend Tommy's tin can collection yesterday. Now they wanted her week's earnings, the money she desperately needed for her mother's prescription. "Please," she whispered to herself, "please help me." The bright lights of City Sanctuary restaurant suddenly pierced through the rain ahead. Rose had always admired the elegant building from afar, watching well-dressed people enter and exit, wondering what it would be like to eat there. Now its warm glow seemed like a beacon of hope. Without thinking, she darted toward the entrance. Inside, Ronald Clark was doing his final inspection of the dining room, something he did every evening before the dinner rush. At 42, he had built City Sanctuary from nothing into one of New York's most respected establishments. Every detail mattered, from the crystal glasses that caught the light just so, to the fresh flowers that adorned each table with quiet elegance. The commotion at the entrance shattered his concentration. A small, drenched figure burst through the doors, trailing water across his immaculate floor. Before he could react, 2 men appeared at the entrance, their intentions clear in their predatory stance. "Come here, you little thief," one of them snarled, taking a step inside. Ronald's eyes met Rose's, and in that fraction of a second, something profound passed between them. In her terrified gaze, he saw himself a scared child running from his father's drunken rage decades ago. In his composed stance, she saw protection she desperately needed. "Gentlemen," Ronald's voice cut through the tension like a steel blade, "I suggest you leave. Now." "This ain't your business." Fancy man, the taller thug spat. "That girl owes us money." Ronald stepped forward, his 6'2" frame suddenly imposing. 20 years ago, he had learned to fight in these same streets. "Everything that happens in my restaurant is my business." His hand reached for the phone. "Shall I call the police, or will you be leaving on your own?" The men hesitated, then backed away, but not before the shorter one pointed at Rose. "This ain't over, girl. We know where you sell your junk." When they were gone, Ronald turned to the trembling child standing in a growing puddle on his imported marble floor. Her dark hair was plastered to her face, and her clothes, clearly second-hand, were soaked through. But it was her eyes that caught his attention. Despite her fear, they held a fierce determination. "Thank you, sir," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry about your floor. I'll clean it up." She looked down at her box of bracelets, now wet but thankfully intact. "Or I can pay for it. These are worth something, I promise." Ronald knelt down to her level, maintaining a careful distance. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Rose. Rose Thompson." "Well, Rose Thompson, I think what we need right now is to get you warm and dry. Then maybe you can tell me why those men were chasing you." He gestured to a quiet corner of the restaurant. "How about some hot chocolate?" Rose hesitated, years of street-learned caution warring with desperate need. "My mom. She's sick. I need to get back to her. She'll worry." "We'll call her," Ronald assured her. "Let her know you're safe." As he led Rose to a secluded booth, Ronald couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was significant, a turning point not just for this child, but for him as well. He didn't know yet that Rose's mother was Carolyn Thompson, once a celebrated chef who had saved his own life decades ago. He couldn't foresee how this rain-soaked evening would lead to the creation of Hope's Kitchen or the battles they would face together. All he knew was that something in Rose's determined spirit had awakened memories he'd long buried, and with them, a chance to repay an old debt he didn't even know he owed. New York City's Fifth Avenue gleamed under the autumn sun of 2024, its glass-fronted buildings reflecting wealth and aspiration in equal measure. City Sanctuary stood as a testament to both old-world elegance and modern sophistication, its restored brownstone facade serving the historic charm, while subtle contemporary touches marked it as one of Manhattan's most prestigious dining establishments. Inside, Ronald Clark's attention to detail manifested in every corner. Warm amber lighting from vintage crystal chandeliers cast a gentle glow over hand-carved mahogany tables. The walls, adorned with black and white photographs of old New York, told stories of the city's enduring spirit. The open kitchen concept allowed diners to witness the orchestrated dance of chefs at work, their white coats pristine against the polished stainless steel backdrop. But just 3 blocks away, the city's facade cracked like old paint, revealing a different reality. Here, in the shadows of luxury apartments and boutique hotels, the homeless gathered in small groups, their possessions packed into shopping carts and worn backpacks. The contrast was striking. While diners at City Sanctuary savored $200 tasting menus, others lined up at nearby soup kitchens for their only meal of the day. Rose Thompson knew both worlds intimately. Each morning she would help her mother Carolyn pack their few belongings into 2 weathered bags, storing them behind a dumpster in an alley they'd claimed as their own. The alley sat between a high-end jewelry store and a trendy coffee shop, where patrons paid $7 for lattes while carefully avoiding eye contact with those outside. Rose had learned to be invisible when needed, to fade into the background as wealthy shoppers passed by, then emerge with her handmade bracelets when she spotted a kind face. The neighborhood itself told the story of New York's rapid gentrification. Once abandoned warehouses had been transformed into luxury lofts, their brick walls now housing art galleries and boutique fitness studios. Food trucks lined the streets, serving gourmet tacos to young professionals who tapped away on laptops at sidewalk tables. The irony wasn't lost on the local homeless population. The same changes that brought more potential customers for Rose's bracelets also meant fewer safe places to sleep at night. City Sanctuary occupied the ground floor of the historic Wellington building, its upper floors housing exclusive law firms and financial consultancies. The restaurant's entrance featured an ornate revolving door, its brass fixtures polished daily to a mirror shine. A small army of staff arrived each morning at 5 a.m., accepting deliveries from local farmers and artisanal suppliers. The sidewalk outside was steam-cleaned every dawn, erasing any evidence of the city's harsher realities before the first breakfast patrons arrived. Inside the kitchen, state-of-the-art equipment stood alongside traditional copper pots and well-seasoned cast-iron pans. Ronald believed in blending the old with the new, just as he balanced classical French techniques with contemporary American cuisine. The wine cellar, temperature-controlled and biometrically secured, housed bottles worth more than what many families earned in a year. Yet Ronald kept a simple coffee station in the back alley, offering free hot drinks to anyone in need, a small gesture of remembrance for his own past. The neighborhood's transformation was evident in its sounds and smells. The aroma of artisanal bread from high-end bakeries mingled with exhaust fumes from delivery trucks. Jazz music drifted from upscale wine bars while street musicians played for spare change on corners. Construction crews worked endlessly, converting old buildings into luxury spaces, their jackhammers providing a constant reminder of change. For Carolyn and Rose, home was a changing concept. On good nights, they found shelter in a church basement run by Sister Margaret, a tough, loving nun who bent rules to help families stay together. Other nights, they huddled in doorways or under bridge overpasses, Carolyn wrapping her thin jacket around Rose as protection against both cold and prying eyes. They had their favorite spots: the public library's reading room for warm afternoons, the 24-hour diner, where kind-hearted servers sometimes slipped them leftover pie, the park bench with the best view of street performers. The The city's economic disparity played out in daily scenes. Business executives in tailored suits walked past veterans holding cardboard signs. Tourists snapped photos of street art, while carefully cropping out the homeless people sleeping beneath it. Luxury car services idled outside restaurants while exhausted delivery workers pedaled past on electric bikes, racing against algorithm-driven timers. City Sanctuary's immediate neighborhood had become a microcosm of urban inequality. The restaurant's block featured 3 Michelin-starred establishments, 2 designer boutiques, and a private members club. Yet in the early morning hours, before the street cleaners made their rounds, the doorways filled with people seeking shelter, their presence an uncomfortable reminder of the city's failures. Ronald observed these contrasts from his office window each morning. His view encompassed both the sleek high-rises of the financial district and the struggling community centers trying to serve those left behind. He had installed heated sidewalk grates outside his restaurant officially to prevent ice in winter, but primarily to provide warm spots for those with nowhere else to go. Small gestures, he knew, against overwhelming need. The city's pulse beat differently at various hours. Dawn brought the first wave of delivery workers and early shift employees. Morning rush hour filled sidewalks with professionals clutching expensive coffee. Tourists dominated midday, followed by the after-work crowd seeking happy hour specials. Late nights belonged to the young party seekers, and finally to those who had nowhere else to go. Weather shaped the landscape differently for different social classes. Rain sent some people diving into Ubers while others huddled under scaffolding. Summer heat drove the wealthy into air-conditioned shops, while leaving others to seek shade in public parks. Winter posed the greatest challenges, turning the city into an obstacle course of survival for its homeless population. This was the New York that Rose navigated daily, learning its rhythms and unwritten rules. She knew which coffee shops would let her use the bathroom without buying anything. She recognized the security guards who would look the other way while she sold her bracelets, and those who would chase her away. She understood the complex social hierarchy of the streets, which corners belonged to which vendors, which blocks were controlled by which groups. It was in this complex urban ecosystem that City Sanctuary had flourished, its success built on Ronald's ability to create an oasis of calm amid the city's chaos. Yet as he watched Rose that first night, soaked and shivering in his immaculate dining room, the carefully maintained barriers between these two New Yorks began to blur, setting the stage for changes that would ripple through the community in unexpected ways. The Wellington building itself stood as a monument to the city's evolving identity. Built in the 1920s, its neo-Gothic architecture spoke of old money and tradition, while its recently renovated interior catered to modern tastes. Like many of its neighbors, it straddled 2 eras, 2 economic realities. Much like Ronald himself, a man who had risen from the streets to claim his place among the city's elite, yet never fully left behind the memories of harder times. Ronald Clark carried himself with the practiced ease of someone who had fought hard for his place in the world. At 42, his 6'2" frame remained fit, though years in the kitchen had left their mark in the slight roundness of his shoulders. His dark hair, peppered with grey at the temples, was always neatly trimmed, a habit born from years of wanting to prove he belonged in the upper echelons of New York's culinary scene. His hands told his story better than words could. They bore the scars of countless burns and cuts, badges of honor from his journey from dishwasher to executive chef. But it was his eyes that revealed the most sharp and observant. They could spot a wine glass with water spots from across the room, yet they softened noticeably when dealing with his staff's personal problems. These same eyes had once watched the streets for danger, had learned to read threats in strangers' stances during his homeless years. Ronald's greatest strength lay in his attention to detail and his ability to run his kitchen with military precision. Every plate that left his kitchen had to be perfect. Every service had to flow smoothly. This perfectionism had earned City Sanctuary its stellar reputation, but it also masked a deeper fear that one mistake could send him tumbling back to the streets he'd escaped. His weakness was trust. Years of betrayal, starting with his mother's abandonment and his father's alcoholic rages, had left him wary of close relationships. He kept people at arm's length, preferring the clean, professional relationships of the restaurant business to messier personal connections. His apartment above the restaurant was immaculate but sterile, lacking the warmth of a true home. 8-year-old Rose Thompson possessed a resilience that both inspired and broke the hearts of those who knew her story. Small for her age, with dark curly hair often tied back in practical braids, she had the quick, watchful eyes of a child who had grown up too fast. Her hands were always in motion, weaving friendship bracelets from threads she collected or salvaged, each one a small masterpiece of color and pattern. Despite her circumstances, Rose maintained an artist's soul. She could find beauty in the most unlikely places, the way sunlight caught a puddle, the patterns of peeling paint on old buildings, the dance of steam from street vents. This sensitivity, however, also meant she felt the world's harshness more deeply. Every dismissive glance from passers-by, every cruel word from better-off children left its mark. Her strength lay in her adaptability and creative problem-solving. She knew every shortcut in a 10-block radius, could gauge a person's kindness from their walk, and had an uncanny ability to make her small supply of art materials last through lean times. But her fierce loyalty to her mother sometimes prevented her from accepting help from others, afraid that any intervention might separate them. Carolyn Thompson, at 39, retained traces of the elegant chef she had once been, despite years of hardship. Her once renowned palate remained sharp, though she now used it to determine which discarded produce was still safe to eat. Her hands, once famous for their knife skills, now shook slightly from illness and malnutrition, but could still craft simple, nutritious meals from whatever she and Rose managed to gather. Before her fall from grace, Carolyn had been a rising star in New York's culinary scene. Photos from that time showed a confident woman with bright eyes and an easy smile, featured in food magazines and television spots. Now her face was lined with worry, her clothes carefully mended but worn, her former fame both a painful memory and a potential liability as she tried to remain anonymous on the streets. Her greatest strength was her unwavering determination to protect and provide for Rose. Every decision, every action, every sacrifice was filtered through this singular purpose. She had maintained her dignity and principles despite their circumstances, never stealing, never begging, always looking for honest work even when doors closed in her face. Yet this same maternal devotion was also her weakness. Pride and fear kept her from seeking help, from reconnecting with old colleagues who might have assisted them. The trauma of losing a husband and her career had left her distrustful of the professional world she had once belonged to. Marcus Stone, owner of the rival restaurant Guilt, represented everything Ronald despised about the industry. At 45, he cultivated a celebrity chef image with his perfectly styled silver hair and carefully curated designer casual wear. His restaurant emphasized style over substance, trends over technique, yet his marketing genius had made it one of the city's hottest spots. Beneath his polished exterior, Marcus harbored a deep resentment towards self-made successes like Ronald. Born into restaurant royalty, he had inherited his first restaurant and bought his way into success. His strength lay in his business acumen and networking skills, but his cooking lacked soul, a fact that food critics had begun to notice. William Clark, Ronald's estranged father, haunted the edges of the story like a cautionary tale. Once a talented carpenter, his battle with alcoholism had destroyed his marriage, his career, and his relationship with his son. Now 65, he drifted between temporary jobs and short-lived attempts at sobriety, his once powerful frame bent by years of hard living. His hands, when steady, still possessed the skill to create beautiful things from wood, a talent that had helped Ronald secure his first restaurant job years ago. But these moments of clarity were rare, overshadowed by his volatile temper and persistent demons. His love for his son, though genuine, was tangled up with jealousy over Ronald's success and shame over his own failures. The restaurant staff formed a crucial supporting cast. There was David, the head waiter, whose military background aligned perfectly with Ronald's need for precision. Maria, the pastry chef who had started as a dishwasher like Ronald, her elaborate desserts now featured in food magazines. And James, the elderly sommelier who had taken a chance on hiring a young, rough-around-the-edges Ronald 20 years ago. Each character carried their own hopes, fears, and secrets, creating a complex web of relationships that would be tested as the story unfolded. Their individual strengths and weaknesses would play crucial roles in the challenges ahead, particularly as the lines between professional and personal relationships began to blur. The bond between Rose and Carolyn Thompson transcended typical mother-daughter relationships, forged in the crucible of survival on New York's unforgiving streets. Each morning began with their ritual, Carolyn braiding Rose's hair with careful fingers, using these quiet moments to check her daughter's health and spirits. They communicated in subtle gestures and half-finished sentences, having learned that privacy was a luxury rarely afforded to the homeless. Their survival strategy operated like a well-rehearsed dance. While Carolyn searched for temporary work in restaurant kitchens, careful to avoid establishments that might recognize her, Rose sold her handmade bracelets from carefully chosen spots near tourist attractions. They met for lunch in different public places each day, a necessary precaution against local gangs who demanded protection money from regular vendors. Each evening they would pool their earnings, Carolyn's face tight with controlled emotion as she counted out coins and crumpled bills. Rose always insisted her mother eat first, while Carolyn consistently arranged for Rose to have the larger portion. These small battles of love played out daily, each trying to protect the other, neither willing to put themselves first. Within City Sanctuary's walls, Ronald Clark had cultivated a different kind of family. His relationship with his staff was built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared dedication to excellence. He demanded perfection but led by example, often working longer hours than anyone else. His employees knew of his journey from homelessness to success, though he rarely spoke of it directly. This unspoken understanding created a culture where second chances were given and personal struggles were met with discretion and support. David Chen, the head waiter, had become Ronald's right hand through their shared military precision approach to service. Their communication often consisted of mere glances and subtle gestures during service, a shorthand developed over years of working together. David understood that Ronald's exacting standards weren't about control but about creating stability, something they both craved after turbulent pasts. Maria Suarez, the pastry chef, held a unique position in the restaurant's hierarchy. Ronald had recognized her raw talent when she was still washing dishes, much as someone had once seen potential in him. Their relationship was marked by professional respect and a careful mentorship, though Ronald maintained the emotional distance he kept with everyone. Maria's creative freedom in the pastry kitchen was both a sign of trust and a testing ground for Ronald's ability to relinquish control. The relationship between Ronald and Marcus Stone, owner of the competing restaurant guild, simmered with professional rivalry and personal antagonism. Their establishments sat 4 blocks apart, engaged in an unspoken competition that played out in reviews, reservations, and staff recruitment. Marcus's inherited success stood in sharp contrast to Ronald's self-made story, creating a tension that rippled through New York's restaurant community. The local community's relationship with City Sanctuary was complex and often contradictory. Wealthy regulars praised its exclusive atmosphere while complaining about the homeless population in the neighborhood. Small business owners appreciated the restaurant's presence for raising property values, but resented the increased rents that came with gentrification. Street vendors like Rose walked a precarious line, attracting both sympathy and scorn from patrons entering the restaurant. William Clark's presence in his son's life resembled a shadow, always there but never fully formed. He would appear occasionally outside the restaurant, sometimes sober and seeking reconciliation, other times drunk and demanding money. Ronald had established a pattern of having security escort him away, though he always secretly ensured his father had access to a nearby shelter. Their relationship existed in this limbo of duty without trust, love without acceptance. Sister Margaret, who ran the church shelter where Rose and Carolyn sometimes stayed, served as a bridge between the neighborhood's disparate communities. She had an understanding with Ronald, calling him when families needed emergency meals, though she never pressured him to do more. Her quiet advocacy had earned her respect from both the homeless community and local business owners, making her an important neutral figure in neighborhood disputes. The relationship between Rose and the streets themselves was intimate and complex. She knew which shopkeepers would let her shelter in their doorways during rain, which security guards would look the other way if she sold her bracelets nearby, which cafes would let her use their bathrooms without buying anything. The city's homeless community had its own social structure, with unwritten rules and hierarchies that Rose navigated with careful precision. Carolyn's relationship with her past career created additional complications. Former colleagues occasionally recognized her, leading to awkward encounters that threatened her anonymity. She had developed techniques for avoiding these situations, keeping her head down in certain neighborhoods, changing her walking routes when food industry events were happening nearby, using her married name Thompson instead of her chef name Sullivan. The initial encounter between Ronald and Rose catalyzed subtle shifts in these established relationships. Rose's presence in the restaurant challenged the carefully maintained boundaries between City Sanctuary's elegant interior and the harsh realities outside its doors. Ronald's instinctive protection of her disrupted his usual emotional distance, while her trust in him, tentative but real, awakened long-buried memories of his own vulnerability. The staff's reaction to Rose revealed underlying currents in their relationship with Ronald. David's military bearing softened when he snuck extra bread to her table. Maria found excuses to share test batches of new desserts. Even James, the usually reserved sommelier, began keeping a stock of hot chocolate for her visits. Their boss's obvious concern for the child gave them permission to express their own compassion more openly. These initial relationships formed the foundation for the deeper connections and conflicts that would develop as their stories intertwined. Each character's response to Rose and Carolyn's presence would test existing loyalties, challenge established boundaries, and ultimately force them to confront their own prejudices and fears. The evening that changed everything at City Sanctuary began like any other. The dining room hummed with the sophisticated murmur of conversation, wine glasses clinked delicately, and the kitchen operated with its usual precision. Ronald Clark stood at his customary post near the kitchen entrance, observing the choreographed dance of servers and sommeliers with practiced attention. Marcus Stone's arrival was announced by the maitre d' with a subtle hand signal, their warning system for VIP guests or potential complications. The rival restaurateur swept in with his usual entourage, his carefully styled silver hair and designer suit a stark contrast to Ronald's practical chef's whites. As protocol demanded, Ronald moved to greet him, their handshake a brief performance of professional courtesy. Ronald, Marcus drawled, his smile not reaching his eyes, thought I'd see how the competition is doing. Though I must say, the neighborhood seems to be going downhill. His gaze flickered to where Rose sat quietly in her corner booth, working on her bracelets while waiting for her mother's shift to end. Carolyn had recently started washing dishes part-time, though few knew her true identity. Ronald's response was measured, years of kitchen discipline keeping his tone even. We maintain our standards regardless of external circumstances, Marcus. Your usual table is ready, if you'd like to be seated. The evening might have proceeded without incident if Carolyn hadn't emerged from the kitchen at that precise moment, carrying a stack of clean plates. Her hands were red from hot water, her grey-streaked hair tucked beneath a practical cap, but there was no disguising the elegant bone structure and precise movements that had once made her a celebrated figure in New York's culinary scene. Marcus's recognition was instant. His eyes widened, then narrowed with calculated interest. Well, he said, voice carrying just far enough to draw attention from nearby tables. If it isn't Carolyn Sullivan herself. Last time I saw you, you were accepting the Rising Star Chef Award. Quite a change of venue, wouldn't you say? The stack of plates trembled slightly in Carolyn's hands, but her voice remained steady. It's Thompson now, and I prefer dishwashing to unemployment. The dining room had grown quieter, the well-heeled patrons suddenly very interested in the drama unfolding before them. Rose had frozen in her corner, her small hands clutching her box of bracelets, eyes darting between her mother and the man who threatened their precarious stability. Marcus's smile turned predatory. Does your current employer know about the scandal? The missing funds? The suspicious fire at your last restaurant? Each question fell like a hammer blow in the hushed room. Or perhaps you've reformed since then, though you're current. He glanced meaningfully at Rose's worn clothes. Circumstances suggest otherwise. Ronald stepped forward, his imposing frame blocking Marcus's line of sight to Carolyn. That's enough, Marcus, whatever you think you know. Oh, I know quite a bit, Marcus interrupted smoothly. In fact, I think the health department would be very interested to learn that you're employing someone with such a colorful past in food service, not to mention the media. Prestigious city Sanctuary Harbor's disgraced chef, imagine the headlines. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Several diners were already discreetly photographing the scene with their phones, no doubt sharing the gossip on social media. Ronald could practically see his restaurant's carefully cultivated reputation crumbling before his eyes. Mr. Stone Rose's clear voice cut through the tension. She had moved to stand beside her mother, small but unbowed. My mother is a good person. She didn't do anything wrong. Marcus's laugh was gentle but cruel. Sweet child, the adults are talking. Though I must say, Ronald, having homeless children in your dining room, that's hardly up to your usual standards. Before Ronald could respond, several things happened at once. A wine glass shattered somewhere in the room. David appeared silently at Ronald's elbow, phone in hand, showing rapidly multiplying social media posts about the confrontation. And William Clark, Ronald's father, chose that moment to stumble through the front door, visibly intoxicated. Ronnie Williams' voice boomed across the room. Your old man needs a favor. He swayed dangerously, knocking into a busboy's tray. The chaos that ensued provided cover for Carolyn to slip back into the kitchen, pulling Rose with her, but the damage was done. Marcus stood in the center of the dining room, surveying the scene with satisfied malice, like a man who had just played a winning hand. Well, he said, adjusting his cuffs with exaggerated care, I seem to have lost my appetite. But don't worry, Ronald. I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of each other very soon. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Carolyn, do give my regards to the health department investigators. I hear they're very thorough these days. The evening service never really recovered, though Ronald's staff worked with professional efficiency to restore order, escorting William out, cleaning up broken glass, soothing disturbed patrons with complimentary wine. The damage was spreading through social media like wildfire. By closing time, food blogs were already running stories about the confrontation, each version more sensational than the last. In his office after service, Ronald stared at his computer screen, watching his restaurant's review ratings drop in real time as the story spread. Carolyn stood before his desk, her posture straight despite her exhaustion, while Rose dozed in a chair by the door. Everything they said about me was a lie, Carolyn said quietly. But proving it would mean lawyers, publicity, money, things I don't have. I'll understand if you want us to leave. Ronald's response would set in motion events that would change all their lives, though he couldn't know it then. His decision in that moment would test his loyalty, challenge his prejudices, and ultimately force him to confront his own past in ways he never expected. The night after Marcus Stone's dramatic appearance at City Sanctuary, Ronald Clark found himself unable to sleep, pacing his apartment above the restaurant. The city lights cast long shadows across his immaculate floors as he wrestled with conflicting instincts. His business sense screamed at him to distance himself from Carolyn and Rose, to protect the enterprise he'd built from nothing. Yet every time he resolved to do so, he saw Rose's determined face as she defended her mother, and something deep within him fractured. In his office, reservation cancellations accumulated in his inbox like falling leaves. Each ping of his phone represented another lost customer, another crack in his carefully constructed world. Ronald's hands shook slightly as he poured himself a glass of water, remembering how those same hands had once rifled through dumpsters for food. Success had always felt precarious to him, a house of cards that could collapse at any moment. "You can't save everyone," he whispered to his reflection in the window, words his first mentor had told him years ago. But the reflection that stared back reminded him of another truth someone had once saved him when they didn't have to. Several floors below, in the restaurant's storage room where Carolyn and Rose had been sleeping on a makeshift bed of tablecloths, another battle raged. Carolyn lay awake, listening to her daughter's steady breathing, each inhale carrying the weight of maternal guilt. She had tried so hard to protect Rose from the consequences of her past, but now those very efforts threatened to destroy the fragile stability they'd found at City Sanctuary. Her mind raced through possibilities, each more desperate than the last. They could leave the city, start fresh somewhere else. But Rose had just started attending the local school, had finally begun to make friends. The thought of uprooting her again made Carolyn's heart ache. Perhaps she could find work at another restaurant under a different name, but Marcus's influence in the industry was far-reaching. Memories of her previous life tormented her: the prestigious awards, the television appearances, the restaurant she'd almost opened before everything fell apart. She had never told Rose the full story of how they'd ended up on the streets, trying to protect her daughter from the bitter knowledge of human betrayal. Now that protection seemed like another failure. Rose, though appearing to sleep, was lost in her own turmoil. Her young mind grappled with adult concerns, trying to understand why people who ate food for the price of a week's worth of her bracelets would judge her mother so harshly. She had always been proud of her mother's cooking, even when their meals came from discarded grocery store produce. The idea that others saw shame where she saw strength confused and angered her. In his luxury apartment across town, Marcus Stone savored his victory like a fine wine, yet something nagged at him. The look in Rose's eyes when she defended her mother had stirred uncomfortable memories of his own childhood, of watching his father destroy competing restaurants through similar tactics. He pushed the thought away, focusing instead on drafting a press release that would further damage City Sanctuary's reputation. David Chen, the head waiter, sat in his small Queens apartment reviewing the evening's events with military precision. His loyalty to Ronald warred with his growing attachment to Rose, who reminded him of his own daughter, lost to cancer years ago. The restaurant's success had given him purpose after leaving the service, but now he questioned whether success at the cost of compassion was victory at all. Maria Suarez, the pastry chef, worked through her anxiety the only way she knew how: by baking, the kitchen filled with the smell of cookies as she struggled with her own past experiences of poverty and discrimination. She had taught Rose some simple baking techniques during quiet afternoon hours, seeing in the girl's enthusiasm her own childhood dreams of becoming a chef. In his usual spot under the bridge, William Clark huddled against the cold, the evening's events playing through his alcohol-fobbed mind. He hadn't meant to cause trouble for his son, he never did. His pride in Ronald's success mixed poisonously with shame at his own failures, creating a paralysis that kept him from either truly helping or staying away. Sister Margaret, in her small room at the church shelter, added another name to her prayer list. She had seen countless stories like Carolyn's end in tragedy, but something about this situation felt different. The intersection of lives at City Sanctuary seemed less like chance and more like providence, though she knew better than to voice such thoughts to her more pragmatic colleagues. Ronald's inner conflict crystallized around his morning routine. As he inspected the dining room, his perfectionist eye caught a small thread from one of Rose's bracelets caught in a chair's upholstery. The sight stopped him short. This simple piece of colored string represented everything he'd worked to keep separate: the street life he'd escaped, the polished world he'd built, the walls he'd erected between past and present. Carolyn's professional instincts surfaced despite her best efforts to suppress them. During her shift, she noticed inefficiencies in the kitchen layout, ways to improve the flow of service. Her fingers itched to correct a junior cook's knife technique, to adjust the seasoning in a sauce. Each suppressed impulse felt like another small death, another piece of herself sacrificed to survival. These internal struggles played out in small gestures and silent moments throughout the restaurant. David positioned himself protectively near Rose's corner during service. Maria left carefully wrapped pastries where Carolyn would find them during her cleanup duties. Even James, the sommelier, found himself setting aside damaged wine labels for Rose's craft projects. The restaurant itself seemed to hold its breath, its usual rhythms disrupted by the undercurrents of emotion flowing beneath the professional surface. Regular customers sensed the tension, though they couldn't name its source. The waitstaff moved with extra care, as if the air itself had become fragile. The weight of decision pressed down on Ronald with each passing hour. His childhood instinct to run from difficult situations battled with the hard-won wisdom of his adult years. He knew that whatever choice he made would define not just his business, but his character, the true measure of how far he'd come from the streets that had both formed and nearly destroyed him. The morning after Marcus Stone's dramatic visit, City Sanctuary's private dining room became an impromptu war room. Ronald Clark sat at the head of the table, surrounded by his senior staff, each bringing different perspectives to the crisis at hand. The tension in the room was palpable as competing viewpoints clashed over the restaurant's future. James Davidson, the veteran sommelier, spoke first, his 40 years in the industry lending weight to his words. "We must consider our reputation first," he stated, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. Fine dining is built on exclusivity. The moment we become known as a charitable enterprise rather than a culinary destination, we lose our core clientele. They come here to escape the city's harsh realities, not confront them. Maria Suarez, the pastry chef, immediately countered, her voice carrying the passion of someone who had climbed from poverty herself. "Our reputation should be built on more than just catering to the wealthy. We have an opportunity to show that excellence and compassion aren't mutually exclusive. Rose and Carolyn aren't just some abstract charity case, they're part of our community now." The debate spread beyond the restaurant's walls as local business owners gathered for their monthly association meeting. Elizabeth Chen, owner of the designer boutique next door, voiced concerns about the increasing presence of homeless individuals in the neighborhood. "We've worked hard to elevate this area," she argued. City Sanctuary's situation is attracting exactly the element we've been trying to discourage. But Thomas Rivera, whose family had run the corner bodega for 3 generations, saw things differently. This neighborhood was built by people helping each other, he reminded the group. "Now that we've found success, we want to pretend we never struggled." Ronald Clark came from the streets himself. "We celebrated that story until it became inconvenient." Within the kitchen, the line cooks and dishwashers had their own heated discussions during prep time. Many came from challenging backgrounds themselves and saw Carolyn's presence as a reminder of how precarious success could be. Others worried that associating with her would jeopardize their own positions if City Sanctuary's reputation suffered. The regular customers were divided as well. Some longtime patrons wrote passionate emails supporting Ronald's compassionate approach, seeing it as a refreshing change in an often cold-hearted industry. Others threatened to cancel their standing reservations, citing concerns about the restaurant's changing atmosphere and clientele. Marcus Stone seized upon these divisions, carefully feeding quotes to sympathetic food critics. "Fine dining isn't about charity," he told the influential Food Wine blog. "It's about maintaining standards. The moment you compromise those standards for emotional reasons, you've lost what makes the experience special." Ronald found himself caught between his board of investors who demanded immediate action to protect their interests and his own staff, who had formed protective bonds with Rose and Carolyn. The investors spoke the language of numbers and risk management, presenting charts showing the potential financial impact of negative publicity. Sister Margaret offered a different perspective when Ronald sought her counsel. "Sometimes the most valuable things in life don't show up on a balance sheet," she said quietly. "You've built a successful restaurant, Ronald, but what kind of legacy do you want to leave? Numbers in a bank account, or lives changed for the better?" The local media picked up the story, framing it as a battle between old and new New York. Some portrayed Ronald as a sellout who had forgotten his roots, while others praised him for maintaining his connection to the community. Food blogs debated whether fine dining could coexist with social responsibility, turning City Sanctuary into a symbol for larger cultural conflicts. Even the restaurant suppliers took sides. Some high-end vendors expressed concerns about being associated with controversy, while others offered additional support. The organic farmer who supplied City Sanctuary's produce quietly increased his deliveries, ensuring there would be extra food available for those in need. The legal perspective came from Patricia Wong, the restaurant's attorney, who laid out the potential risks and liabilities. While there's no law against helping people, she explained, we need to consider the regulatory implications. Health department standards, labor laws, insurance requirements, everything becomes more complicated when you blur the lines between business and charity. Young entrepreneurs in the industry watched the situation with interest, debating whether Ronald's actions represented an outdated sense of personal obligation or a new model of socially conscious business. Some saw opportunity in the crisis, positioning their own establishments as either more exclusive or more community-oriented in response. Social media amplified these divisions, with hashtags supporting both sides trending locally. Food influencers posted long threads analyzing the situation, their followers dividing into passionate camps. The conversation expanded beyond City Sanctuary to touch on broader issues of gentrification, social responsibility, and the role of businesses in community welfare. Rose, wise beyond her years, observed these conflicts with a child's clarity. "Why do grown-ups make everything so complicated?" she asked Ronald one evening. "You either help people or you don't. The food still tastes the same whether the person eating it is rich or poor." Carolyn's former colleagues in the industry debated her situation in private message groups. Some shared stories of her past generosity, times she had helped others in the industry. Others questioned whether her presence would taint the profession's reputation. The divide often fell along generational lines, with younger chefs more likely to support her. These opposing viewpoints created an atmosphere of uncertainty within City Sanctuary. Each interaction seemed charged with deeper meaning, each decision scrutinized for its broader implications. The restaurant teetered between worlds, between exclusivity and accessibility, tradition and change, profit and purpose. In the weeks following the confrontation with Marcus Stone, subtle changes began to manifest in the dynamics at City Sanctuary. Ronald Clark found himself spending more time in the kitchen during off hours when Carolyn worked her cleaning shift. At first, their interactions were purely professional, brief exchanges about cleaning supplies and schedules, but gradually their shared understanding of kitchen dynamics created a quiet rapport. One evening, as Carolyn efficiently reorganized the storage shelves, Ronald noticed her methodical approach mirrored his own. "You've improved our inventory system," he observed, studying the newly arranged space. The rotation makes more sense now." Carolyn paused, her hands hovering over a box of specialty ingredients. "Old habits," she replied softly. When you've run a 3-star kitchen, efficiency becomes second nature. It was the first time she'd openly referenced her past, and the moment hung between them like delicate crystal. During these quiet hours, Ronald began to recognize the chef's instincts that still guided Carolyn's movements. She unconsciously adjusted misaligned pot handles, squared away cutting boards with precision, and maintained the kind of spotless workspace that spoke of years of professional discipline. These small gestures revealed more about her character than any resume could. Rose, meanwhile, had carved out her own unique place in the restaurant's ecosystem. Between homework sessions in her corner booth, she began creating custom friendship bracelets for the staff. Each design reflected its recipient: bold patterns for Maria, military precision for David, elegant simplicity for James. These small gifts, crafted with careful attention to individual personalities, demonstrated an emotional intelligence that belied her years. The young girl's presence had an unexpected effect on Ronald's interaction with his staff. He found himself softening his typically rigid management style, allowing small personal touches that would have previously seemed unprofessional. When Maria started teaching Rose basic pastry techniques during slow afternoons, Ronald not only permitted it but occasionally joined these impromptu lessons. Through these teaching sessions, Maria's own character developed new dimensions. Her passion for pastry became intertwined with a maternal instinct she hadn't known she possessed. She began creating simpler versions of complex desserts, finding joy in Rose's delight at mastering basic techniques. Sometimes the simplest things are the most satisfying, she told Ronald, watching Rose pipe her first perfect rosette. David's military background revealed surprising depths as he appointed himself Rose's unofficial protector. His typically stern demeanor softened when she was nearby, though his vigilance never wavered. He developed a routine of scanning the street before Rose left each evening, his training repurposed for this small but crucial mission. In the service, we protected whole villages, he explained to Ronald during a quiet moment. Sometimes it was just about making one person feel safe. It changes everything, having someone to protect. Carolyn's character emerged most clearly in the small hours of the morning, when she thought no one was watching. Ronald, arriving early one day, found her teaching Rose multiplication tables using dinner rolls, combining education with practicality in a way that spoke volumes about her priorities as a mother. The relationship between Ronald and Rose evolved through subtle interactions. He began leaving business magazines in her corner booth, having noticed her interest in numbers. She, in turn, started creating elaborate systems for organizing the magazines, revealing an innate talent for structure that matched his own. One rainy afternoon, Ronald found Rose staring intently at the restaurant's accounting books he'd left open on his desk. Instead of closing them, he pulled up a chair. "Would you like to learn how a restaurant works?" he asked. Her eager nod launched a series of informal business lessons that became a daily ritual. The deepening of characters extended to the restaurant's peripheral figures. James, the sommelier, revealed an unexpected artistic streak when he began collecting wine labels for Rose's craft projects. His carefully curated selection showed both his refined taste and a growing investment in the girl's creative development. Even Marcus Stone's character gained complexity through his continued opposition. His weekly inspections of City Sanctuary, meant to intimidate, revealed a deep-seated insecurity about his own inherited success. His pointed comments about Carolyn's fall from grace masked a fear of similar failure, though few recognized this motivation behind his cruelty. William Clark's appearances became more frequent, though he maintained his distance. He would stand across the street, watching the restaurant's operations through the large windows. Sometimes Rose would wave to him, and his gruff acknowledgement revealed hints of the father he might have been under different circumstances. Sister Margaret's role evolved beyond that of mere shelter provider. Her periodic visits to check on Carolyn and Rose became opportunities for quiet counsel with Ronald. Her practical wisdom, shaped by years of working with both the privileged and the desperate, helped bridge the growing divide between City Sanctuary's various factions. Through these interactions, the characters' depths emerged not in dramatic revelations but in small, quiet moments. A shared laugh over a cooking mishap, a silent understanding during a difficult service, a gentle correction of a technique. Each interaction added layers to their developing relationships. The restaurant itself seemed to absorb these changes, its atmosphere shifting subtly as the characters within its walls grew and evolved. The elegant dining room maintained its sophisticated ambience, but now it held stories within its walls, stories of growth, connection, and unexpected kinship. The emotional complexities at City Sanctuary began to surface during a particularly busy Friday evening service. The dining room buzzed with its usual elegant energy, but beneath the polished surface, tensions simmered. Rose sat at her usual corner booth, attempting to complete her mathematics homework while simultaneously watching her mother navigate the delicate dance of being both invisible and indispensable in the kitchen. Ronald observed a subtle interaction that crystallized the emotional challenges they faced. A wealthy regular patron, catching sight of Carolyn clearing plates, remarked loudly about the decline in standards. Rose's shoulders stiffened at the comment, her pencil pressing so hard against her paper that the tip broke. The sound of that small snap carried to Ronald's ears like a gunshot. The incident sparked a series of deeper emotional confrontations. That evening, after service, Ronald found Rose alone in the kitchen, attempting to repair her broken pencil with determination that barely masked her hurt. "Why do they look at Mom that way?" she asked, her voice steady but her hands trembling. "She works harder than anyone." Ronald's response required navigating his own emotional minefield. How could he explain social prejudices to a child while managing his own conflicted feelings about maintaining the restaurant's prestigious image? His answer came slowly, carefully. "Sometimes people forget that worth isn't measured by what you own or where you work. Your mother hasn't forgotten that, and neither should you." Carolyn's emotional struggles manifested in quieter ways. During prep time, she would pause occasionally watching the kitchen staff execute techniques she had once taught in prestigious culinary schools. Her hands would move unconsciously, muscle memory conducting an invisible orchestra of cooking processes she could no longer perform publicly. The weight of her unrealized potential hung heavy in these moments. The situation reached a critical point during a private event for the city's top food critics. As Carolyn efficiently cleared plates from a table of influential reviewers, one of them recognized her. "Carolyn Sullivan. My God, I covered your Rising Star nomination." The critic's voice carried across the room, causing conversations to halt. "What happened to you?" The silence that followed was deafening. Carolyn stood frozen, plates balanced perfectly in her hands, her professional mask threatening to crack. Ronald, observing from across the room, saw something in her expression he recognized from his own past, the particular shame of having one's failures publicly displayed. Maria, witnessing the scene, created an immediate diversion by accidentally dropping a tray of desserts. The resulting commotion allowed Carolyn to slip away, but the emotional impact lingered. Later that night, Ronald found her in the walk-in refrigerator, organizing supplies with mechanical precision, using routine to rebuild her composure. "I used to judge people like me," she admitted quietly, not turning around. "When I had my own kitchen, I looked down on the dishwashers, the cleanup crew. Now I understand their dignity, their strength." Her voice caught. "But sometimes I miss who I was so much it physically hurts." The staff's emotional investment in Rose and Carolyn's situation created its own complications. David struggled with maintaining professional distance while wanting to protect them. During one incident, when a drunk patron made a cruel comment about homeless parasites, David's military bearing barely contained his anger. His hands shook as he politely but firmly escorted the customer out. James, the usually stoic sommelier, faced his own emotional challenge when he discovered Rose using discarded wine crates as makeshift furniture in the storage room where she and Carolyn slept. The sight of the child's attempts to create a semblance of normalcy affected him deeply. He began leaving small gifts: a proper pillow, a reading lamp, each item carefully chosen to respect their dignity, while offering comfort. Ronald's emotional barriers, built over years of protecting himself from his past, began to show cracks. He found himself sharing more of his own story with Rose during their informal business lessons. Teaching her about profit margins led to discussions about value, worth, and the true meaning of wealth. Her innocent questions often struck uncomfortably close to his own unresolved issues. The relationship between Ronald and Carolyn developed additional layers of complexity. Their shared understanding of kitchen hierarchy and restaurant operations created a professional respect that sometimes veered dangerously close to personal connection. During quiet moments after service, their discussions about menu planning and kitchen efficiency would occasionally slip into more personal territory, before both retreated behind their carefully maintained walls. Marcus Stone's continued pressure on the restaurant forced everyone to confront their emotional vulnerabilities. His weekly visits, ostensibly for dinner but actually for surveillance, created a tension that affected the entire staff. Each time he appeared, Ronald watched Rose instinctively move closer to her mother, while Carolyn's posture became more rigid, more defensive. The emotional toll began to show in subtle ways. Maria's pastries became more elaborate, as if she could protect Rose and Carolyn through sheer culinary excellence. David's security rounds became more frequent, his protective instincts heightened by perceived threats. Even the regular customers seemed affected, choosing sides in an unspoken battle between compassion and propriety. The first major confrontation erupted during a quiet Sunday afternoon at City Sanctuary. Ronald had called a staff meeting to discuss the restaurant's direction, but what began as a professional discussion quickly evolved into something more fundamental. The private dining room became an arena for deeper debates about values, identity, and purpose. "We need to decide what kind of establishment we truly are," James began, his voice carrying the weight of his 40 years in fine dining. He stood at one end of the table, wine list clutched in his hands like a shield. "Our reputation for excellence, our Michelin aspirations, these aren't just matters of pride. They represent a commitment to our craft, to elevating the dining experience above everyday concerns." Maria rose from her seat, her pastry-dusted apron a stark contrast to James's formal attire. "And what about our commitment to humanity? To the principles Ronald himself embodied when he started this restaurant?" Her voice trembled with contained emotion. "We named this place Sanctuary for a reason. Or was that just clever branding?" The debate intensified when David, who rarely spoke at meetings, stepped forward. "In the military we had a saying, 'No one gets left behind.' It wasn't just about combat, it was about maintaining our humanity in difficult situations." He looked directly at Ronald. "Sir, your success story inspired many of us to work here. Are we now saying that story is too uncomfortable for our clientele?" The confrontation took an unexpected turn when Carolyn entered to clean the room, not realizing the meeting was still in progress. The sudden silence that fell spoke volumes. She began to retreat, but Ronald made a decision. "Stay," he said. "This concerns you too." Carolyn straightened her shoulders, years of professional pride visible in her posture. "I appreciate everything you've all done," she began carefully. "But I never intended to become a symbol or a cause. My daughter and I can find somewhere else to." "No," Mom Rose's voice cut through the tension. She had slipped in behind her mother, small but determined. "We're not running anymore. Running doesn't solve anything, isn't that what you always tell me?" The confrontation deepened as each staff member began sharing personal stories that had previously gone unspoken. Maria revealed her own childhood in a homeless shelter, describing how a kind restaurant owner had given her mother a job as a dishwasher, changing their lives. James, to everyone's surprise, spoke of his alcoholic brother, currently living on the streets, and his daily struggle with guilt over not doing more to help. The debate evolved into a profound discussion about the nature of excellence itself. Was true excellence measured solely by pristine table settings and perfect plating, or did it encompass a broader vision of what a restaurant could be? The staff found themselves examining their own prejudices and assumptions. A crucial moment came when Rose, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "Mr. Clark, remember when you taught me about profit margins?" She pulled out one of her handmade bracelets. "You said value isn't just about the cost of materials, it's about what something means to people. Isn't that true for the restaurant too?" Her simple question sparked a more nuanced discussion about the restaurant's identity. Ronald found himself sharing more of his own story, not just the sanitized version that appeared in magazine profiles, but the raw truth of his journey from homelessness to success. He described the moments of kindness that had saved him, the opportunities that had come from people willing to look past his circumstances. The confrontation reached its climax when Marcus Stone arrived unannounced, catching the tail end of the discussion. His practiced sneer faltered slightly as he observed the scene staff and management engaged in an honest dialogue about purpose and values, with Rose and Carolyn fully integrated into the conversation. "How touching," he said, his sarcasm barely masking his discomfort. "A five-star soup kitchen. I'm sure your investors will be thrilled," but for the first time his words seemed to fall flat, failing to intimidate. Ronald rose to face him, his response measured but firm. "Marcus, you've spent your career trying to tell stories through food, but you've missed the most important story, the one about how food brings people together, breaks down barriers, creates community. That's what City Sanctuary is about. That's what it's always been about." The confrontation concluded not with a clear resolution, but with a deeper understanding among all present. The staff began to see their roles differently, not just as professionals in the hospitality industry, but as participants in a larger narrative about dignity, opportunity, and human connection. The turning point at City Sanctuary arrived on a rain-soaked Tuesday evening, when Marcus Stone orchestrated his most calculated attack yet. He had arranged for a prominent food critic from the New York Times to dine at the restaurant, but this wasn't a standard review. The critic, Eleanor Hayes, was known for her scathing exposes on restaurant industry scandals, and Marcus had supplied her with a carefully curated dossier on Carolyn's past. Ronald first sensed something amiss when he noticed the critic's unusual attention to the kitchen operations rather than the food itself. Eleanor's questions to the staff focused persistently on their back-of-house procedures, health code compliance, and employee backgrounds. Her companion, a sharp-eyed man who identified himself as a private investigator, took copious notes on his phone. The situation escalated when Eleanor deliberately dropped her napkin near the kitchen entrance. As Carolyn emerged with a stack of clean plates, the critic staged a loud recognition scene. "Aren't you Carolyn Sullivan, the chef who was investigated for food safety violations and financial irregularities at Le Petit Jardin?" The dining room fell silent. Carolyn stood perfectly still, her professional composure wavering only slightly. The private investigator began photographing her with his phone, while Eleanor continued her pointed questioning. "Can you comment on the circumstances surrounding the fire that destroyed your previous restaurant's financial records?" Ronald moved to intervene, but the damage was already spreading. Other diners had their phones out, recording the confrontation. Social media notifications began pinging across the room as the scene went viral in real time. Marcus Stone, seated at his usual table, watched with barely concealed satisfaction. The true devastation came when Eleanor revealed her next piece of information. "Sources indicate that you've been allowing your underage daughter to work in the kitchen, violating child labor laws. Do you deny these allegations?" The accusation struck at the heart of Carolyn's deepest vulnerability, her relationship with Rose. Rose, who had been completing her homework in her usual corner, rushed to her mother's defense. "That's not true. Mom never lets me work here. I just study and make my bracelets." Her passionate defense, while touching, only provided more fodder for the growing media circus. Eleanor turned her attention to Ronald. "Mr. Clark, were you aware of Ms. Sullivan's history when you hired her? Or did your own background of homelessness cloud your judgment about proper hiring practices in fine dining?" The question carried a double sting, attacking both his professional judgment and his past. The crisis deepened as health department officials, apparently tipped off by Marcus, arrived for a surprise inspection. They moved through the kitchen with unprecedented thoroughness, their presence adding weight to the mounting accusations. The evening service ground to a halt as regular customers requested their checks, unwilling to be associated with the unfolding scandal. In his office later that night, Ronald faced the immediate consequences. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from investors threatening to withdraw their support. Email notifications showed reservation cancellations mounting by the minute. The restaurant's social media accounts were flooded with negative comments and one-star reviews. But the personal impact cut deeper than any financial loss. Carolyn stood before him, her dignity intact but her eyes revealing profound exhaustion. "I should leave," she said quietly. "You've done more than enough for us, and I won't be the reason your dream falls apart." Rose, sitting in her usual chair by the door, clutched her box of bracelets tightly. "Mom, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Mr. Clark can fix this." "He fixes everything." The child's faith in him made Ronald's next words even more difficult. "Perhaps," he began carefully, "it would be best if you took some time away, just until this dies down." The words felt like ashes in his mouth, a betrayal of everything he claimed to believe in. But with the health department investigation pending and investors threatening to pull out, he saw no alternative. The look of understanding in Carolyn's eyes somehow hurt worse than if she had been angry. She simply nodded, gathering her few belongings with the efficiency of someone used to quick departures. Rose, however, couldn't maintain such composure. "You're just like all the others," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You pretend to care until it gets hard. Until it costs you something." Her words struck Ronald like physical blows, each one exposing the gap between his proclaimed values and his actions in this crucial moment. As they prepared to leave, Maria burst into the office. The health department found nothing, she reported breathlessly. The kitchen passed with flying colors. But Marcus is out there giving interviews about ongoing concerns and public safety. She looked at Carolyn and Rose's packed bags, her expression falling. "You're not really letting them leave, are you?" Ronald stood at his office window, watching the media vans gathering outside. Every business instinct told him to distance himself from the controversy, but Rose's words echoed in his mind, along with memories of his own past of doors closed, of help withdrawn when it became inconvenient. The decision he made in that moment would define not just the future of City Sanctuary, but the kind of person he had become. The consequences would reshape relationships, challenge loyalties, and force everyone involved to confront their true values. The morning after the media storm broke, Ronald Clark sat alone in City Sanctuary's empty dining room, facing the most difficult decision of his career. Before him lay two documents: a statement from his investors demanding Carolyn's immediate termination, and a resignation letter he'd drafted but hadn't signed. The early morning light cast long shadows across the pristine tablecloths, a reminder of everything he stood to lose. His phone buzzed with a message from his real estate agent. 3 competing restaurants had already expressed interest in the space, should City Sanctuary close. The agent suggested arranging viewings just in case. Ronald placed the phone face down, unable to contemplate that possibility, yet knowing he needed to make a decision before the day's service began. Carolyn faced her own agonizing choice in the church shelter where she and Rose had spent the night. Sister Margaret had offered them permanent residence and a position in the shelter's kitchen, providing stability but requiring them to give up their connection to City Sanctuary. Sometimes, the nun said gently, we need to accept when one door closes so another can open. Rose sat on her temporary bed, methodically sorting her bracelet-making materials. Her own decision centered on whether to attend school that day, knowing the media attention would have reached her classmates. Maybe we should leave the city, she suggested quietly to her mother. Start over somewhere new. The resignation in her young voice reflected too many fresh starts, too many goodbyes. David Chen arrived early for his shift, his military training evident in his deliberate movements as he conducted his usual security sweep. Finding Ronald in the dining room, he stood at attention and delivered his own decision. Sir, if you'll accept it, I'd like to offer my resignation in protest if Ms. Thompson is terminated. Some orders shouldn't be followed. In the kitchen, Maria worked through her emotions the only way she knew how, by baking. Her decision manifested in the dozens of pastries she prepared, knowing they might be her last at City Sanctuary. Each perfect croissant represented a choice between professional security and personal integrity. James Davidson, the sommelier, brought his own perspective to the crisis. The wine cellar represents $2 million of inventory, he stated factually. Our collectors will pull their bottles if we become associated with scandal. But, he added, his voice softening, some vintages improve through adversity. The staff gathered for the pre-service meeting, each person carrying the weight of their own decision. Some had already updated their resumes, while others were prepared to stand with Ronald regardless of the consequences. The usual precision of their preparation was tinged with uncertainty about whether this would be their final service together. Ronald's decision crystallized when he received an unexpected visit from William Clark, his father. For once, William was sober, his hands steady as he placed a small wooden box on Ronald's desk. Inside lay old newspaper clippings about Carolyn Sullivan's rise in the culinary world, along with a surprising revelation. She gave me meals, William explained, his voice rough with emotion. Back when you first ran away, she was running a small diner then, before her big success. She'd feed anyone who needed it, no questions asked. Never knew her name until I saw her picture in the paper years later. He met his son's eyes. Some debts can't be measured in dollars, boy. The decision facing Ronald now transcended business considerations. It became a question of identity, of whether success had changed him so fundamentally that he could no longer recognize himself in the mirror. The cost of standing by Carolyn and Rose would be enormous, but the cost of abandoning them might be greater in ways that couldn't be quantified. Marcus Stone, sensing victory, made his own decisive move. He offered to buy City Sanctuary at a premium price, promising to retain most of the staff. Everyone except the charity cases, of course, he added smoothly. Let's restore this place to its former glory. The offer represented a clean escape from the crisis, a way to save face and protect his investment. The investors scheduled an emergency board meeting for that evening, expecting Ronald to present his plan for damage control. Their message was clear: choose between his business and his principles. The financial reports spread across his desk showed the tangible cost of taking a stand, cancelled reservations, withdrawn investments, mounting negative publicity. Each hour brought new decisions, each choice carrying its own consequences. The produce suppliers needed to know whether to deliver the next day's orders. The staff needed direction about how to handle the growing media presence outside. The regular customers called, asking whether their private events would need to be relocated. Rose appeared at Ronald's office door during this deliberation, her small frame carrying an air of determination. She placed one of her handmade bracelets on his desk, not the simple kind she sold on the street, but an intricate pattern that must have taken hours to create. Mom always says we should repay kindness, she said simply, even when we can't afford anything else. The bracelet's complex weave reminded Ronald of the interconnected lives now affected by his decision. Each thread represented someone who had taken a chance on him during his own journey from the streets: the chef who'd given him his first job, the banker who'd approved his first loan, the customers who'd supported his early struggles. The consequences of Ronald Clark's stand reverberated through City Sanctuary with the force of an earthquake. Within hours of his public announcement that he would not only retain Carolyn Thompson but promote her to sous chef, the restaurant's prestigious investors withdrew their support. Their departure was marked by the swift removal of expensive wine collections and the cancellation of high-profile reservations booked months in advance. The financial impact manifested immediately. Premium suppliers, sensing uncertainty, demanded payment in advance. 3 senior servers resigned, unwilling to risk their reputations in what they perceived as a sinking enterprise. The restaurant's premium credit line was frozen, leaving Ronald to manage daily operations with rapidly dwindling cash reserves. Marcus Stone capitalized on the situation, contacting City Sanctuary's former investors and presenting his competing restaurant, Guilt, as a more stable alternative. By week's end, he had secured their backing and implemented an aggressive marketing campaign positioning his establishment as the city's premier fine dining destination. The local press proved relentless in their coverage. Headlines questioned Ronald's judgment, with some articles suggesting that his own background of homelessness had compromised his business acumen. Food critics, who had previously praised City Sanctuary's innovation, now wrote scathing reviews focusing more on perceived social implications than culinary execution. Within the restaurant, the remaining staff faced their own challenges. David Chen's security duties expanded as protesters began gathering outside, some supporting Ronald's decision, others condemning it. The conflicting groups created an atmosphere of tension that affected customer access and staff safety. Maria's pastry department suffered from the loss of premium ingredients as suppliers tightened their credit terms. She adapted by developing simpler desserts, but the change was noted by regular customers who had come to expect elaborate creations. Her reputation in the culinary world, carefully built over years, began to show signs of strain. The most immediate practical consequence fell on Carolyn herself. Her promotion to sous chef, intended as a statement of trust, drew immediate scrutiny from health department officials. They demanded extensive documentation of her credentials and initiated a thorough review of her previous employment history. The process consumed hours that should have been spent reorganizing the kitchen. Rose experienced the ripple effects at school. Some parents withdrew their children from shared activities, treating homelessness as if it were contagious. Teachers who had previously praised her academic performance now watched her with concerned sympathy, as if expecting her circumstances to suddenly affect her capabilities. The restaurant's elegant dining room, once filled with the quiet murmur of sophisticated conversation, now sat half-empty during peak service hours. The remaining customers seemed divided between those making a social statement by their continued patronage and others who hadn't heard about the controversy. The atmosphere had changed from refined relaxation to conscious choice. William Clark's presence became more frequent, though his behavior showed unexpected change. He remained sober, offering to help with maintenance tasks that the restaurant could no longer afford to outsource. His efforts were imperfect but sincere, creating an additional complexity in Ronald's already challenging situation. Sister Margaret's shelter experienced an unexpected consequence as well. Other homeless families, hearing about Carolyn's story, began arriving with hopes of similar opportunities. The shelter's resources stretched thin, creating a new kind of crisis as the nun tried to manage rising expectations with limited means. The kitchen's dynamic shifted dramatically. Some line cooks, initially resentful of Carolyn's promotion, began to appreciate her deep knowledge and efficient systems. Others, however, struggled with taking direction from someone they had recently viewed as subordinate. The tension manifested in small ways: missed prep work, subtle insubordination, passive resistance to new procedures. Social media amplified every development. Food influencers posted lengthy commentaries about the intersection of fine dining and social responsibility. Restaurant industry workers shared their own stories of homelessness and hardship. Competing establishments carefully monitored the situation, adjusting their own policies and practices in response to public reaction. The most profound consequences emerged in unexpected places. Regular customers who had initially withdrawn their business began to return, drawn by reports of Carolyn's innovative additions to the menu. Her perspective as someone who had experienced food insecurity brought a unique authenticity to the restaurant's approach to reducing waste and maximizing ingredients. Rose's bracelet business, ironically, flourished amid the controversy. Supporters of City Sanctuary began wearing them as symbols of solidarity, creating an unexpected source of revenue. She established a small workshop in her corner of the restaurant, teaching other homeless children the craft and sharing the proceeds. Yet these positive developments carried their own price. Each success story attracted more scrutiny, more questions, more demands for Ronald to justify his decisions. The restaurant's identity was shifting, but the direction of that change remained unclear. Every service brought new challenges, every review carried greater weight, every decision faced increased examination. The first signs of serious trouble appeared during a routine health inspection at City Sanctuary. What should have been a standard visit transformed into an exhaustive 3-day examination. The inspectors, clearly responding to pressure from unnamed sources, scrutinized every corner of the operation with unprecedented thoroughness. Their presence disrupted service, unnerved staff, and created an atmosphere of constant tension. During this inspection, a pipe burst in the kitchen's aging plumbing system. Under normal circumstances, Ronald would have simply called his regular contractor for immediate repairs. However, with the restaurant's credit frozen and cash reserves dwindling, he faced the reality that even basic maintenance now presented a significant challenge. The kitchen staff worked around the problem, using temporary solutions that they all knew couldn't last. Carolyn's past returned to haunt them in an unexpected way. A former employee from her previous restaurant appeared with documents allegedly proving her culpability in the fire that had destroyed her business. Though the papers were clearly fabricated, the mere existence of such documents forced Ronald to divert precious resources toward legal representation. The mounting legal fees added another strain to the restaurant's already precarious finances. The situation worsened when several key suppliers, pressured by Marcus Stone's influence in the industry, declined to renew their contracts with City Sanctuary. The loss of their premier meat and produce vendors forced Carolyn to completely reorganize the menu, substituting expensive ingredients with more affordable alternatives. While her creativity produced remarkable results, some longtime customers noticed the change and began to question the restaurant's standards. Rose's education became another point of crisis. Her school's administration, concerned about the media attention surrounding her family, suggested she might be more comfortable in a different environment. The implication that her presence somehow diminished the school's prestigious image sparked a heated debate among parents and staff, placing Rose at the center of unwanted attention. The weather turned against them as winter approached. The restaurant's heating system, another aging infrastructure element, began to fail intermittently. Diners sitting near windows complained about cold drafts, while the kitchen staff struggled to maintain proper temperatures for food preparation. The repair estimates for both issues exceeded the restaurant's available funds by a significant margin. Marcus Stone escalated his campaign against City Sanctuary by opening a lunch service at Guilt, directly competing for their midday business customers. His new menu deliberately undercut City Sanctuary's prices while maintaining the high-end ingredients that Ronald could no longer afford. The impact on their lunch service was immediate and devastating. The staff's morale began to suffer under the constant pressure. Long hours, reduced pay, and the perpetual uncertainty took their toll. Even David, with his military discipline, showed signs of strain as he managed the increasing security concerns with limited resources. The restaurant's once pristine standards began to show small signs of slipping minor details that Ronald would never have tolerated in better times. A particularly harsh blow came when James, the veteran sommelier, suffered a heart attack during service. Though he survived, his absence left a significant gap in the restaurant's expertise. Wine sales, a crucial source of revenue, declined sharply without his knowledgeable guidance. The incident also raised questions about the increased stress levels among the aging staff members. The media, initially supportive of Ronald's stance, began publishing articles questioning the sustainability of his approach. Stories appeared suggesting that his attempt to help one family might end up costing dozens of employees their livelihoods. These pieces, while seemingly balanced, undermined confidence in City Sanctuary's future and further damaged their reputation in the industry. William Clark's efforts to help, though well-intentioned, sometimes created additional complications. His attempts at repairs based on outdated methods and materials occasionally caused more problems than they solved. Yet Ronald couldn't bring himself to turn away his father's assistance, adding another layer of complexity to their already strained relationship. The final blow came when a prominent food critic published a scathing review that went beyond the usual critique of food and service. The article suggested that City Sanctuary had become a social experiment at the expense of culinary excellence. The reviewer's words, "Noble intentions cannot substitute for truffles and foie gras," became a damaging soundbite repeated throughout the industry. Through all this, Carolyn worked with quiet determination. Though Ronald could see the weight of responsibility in her eyes, she knew that each setback was attributed, directly or indirectly, to her presence. The pressure to perform perfectly, to justify her position with every dish that left the kitchen, created an almost unbearable burden. Sister Margaret continued to offer support, but even her resources were stretched thin. The shelter's own funding had been affected by its association with the controversy, limiting her ability to provide backup assistance when needed. Her visits became less frequent, though her concern grew more evident. The culmination of these challenges materialized in a notice from the building's owners. They had received complaints about the changing character of the establishment and its effect on neighboring businesses. The carefully worded letter suggested that they might not renew City Sanctuary's lease when it expired in 6 months. The breaking point arrived during City Sanctuary's prestigious annual charity gala, an event that had traditionally showcased the restaurant's finest offerings to the city's elite. The evening began with an ominous tone as Marcus Stone arrived unexpectedly, accompanied by several of the restaurant's former investors and a news crew from a major network. Ronald, overseeing final preparations in the kitchen, received an urgent call from his bank. The restaurant's last remaining line of credit had been suspended, effectively freezing their accounts mid-service. The timing was no coincidence. Marcus had leveraged his connections to orchestrate this financial ambush during their most important event of the year. In the dining room, Carolyn expertly managed the kitchen's output, despite their limited resources, creating elegant presentations from simpler ingredients. However, the tension escalated when one of Marcus's companions loudly questioned the authenticity of a signature dish, claiming it didn't match the standard of previous years. The confrontation drew attention from other guests, creating a ripple of whispered conversations throughout the room. The situation deteriorated further when William Clark appeared, more disheveled than usual. He demanded to speak with Ronald, his voice carrying across the dining room. His presence, though well-intentioned, provided Marcus with another opportunity. The rival restaurateur began recording the scene on his phone, narrating quietly about the unfortunate decline of City Sanctuary. Rose, who had been helping Maria in the pastry kitchen, emerged to find her carefully crafted dessert decorations being criticized by former patrons. The young girl stood frozen as she overheard wealthy guests making thinly veiled comments about charity cases ruining fine dining establishments. Her hands, still dusted with powdered sugar, clenched into tight fists. The crisis peaked when Marcus made his move. Standing in the center of the dining room, he addressed the assembled guests with practiced charm. He announced his intention to save City Sanctuary by purchasing the restaurant, promising to restore its former glory while implementing a more appropriate hiring policy. His words were met with approving murmurs from many of the gathered socialites. Ronald emerged from the kitchen to find his life's work being dismantled before his eyes. The elegant dining room had become a battleground of social politics and personal vendettas. Marcus stood triumphant, surrounded by nodding supporters, while longtime staff members watched helplessly from the periphery. In this charged atmosphere, Carolyn made a decision that would change everything. She walked calmly to the center of the room, her chef's whites pristine despite the evening's chaos. With quiet dignity, she began to share the truth about the fire that had destroyed her previous restaurant, a truth that implicated Marcus Stone himself. The revelation came through a series of documents that Sister Margaret had discovered in her church's archives. The papers provided evidence that Marcus had orchestrated the destruction of Carolyn's restaurant years ago, seeing her rising success as a threat to his family's dining empire. The documentation was irrefutable, including financial records and witness statements that had been buried through legal manipulation. Marcus's composed facade cracked. His attempt to discredit Carolyn turned into a public unraveling as she methodically presented her evidence. The news crew he had brought to document City Sanctuary's downfall now captured his own exposure instead. The wealthy guests who had been criticizing the restaurant moments before fell silent, watching the drama unfold. William Clark, surprisingly sober and clear-eyed, stepped forward to provide his own testimony. He had been working maintenance at Carolyn's previous restaurant on the night of the fire. His evidence, suppressed for years through a combination of bribes and threats, corroborated Carolyn's account perfectly. The confrontation reached its climax when Rose stepped forward, still wearing her pastry apron. She faced Marcus directly, her young voice clear and steady as she addressed him. "You tried to destroy my mother twice," she said, "but you never understood what makes a restaurant special. It's not about money or power. It's about bringing people together, about creating something that makes others happy." Her words, simple yet profound, cut through the tension in the room. The gathered guests, many of whom had been ready to support Marcus's takeover moments before, began to see the situation in a new light. The news crew captured every moment, their cameras documenting this unexpected turn of events. The evening ended with Marcus's hasty departure, his carefully constructed plan in shambles. But the damage to City Sanctuary was already done. The freezing of their accounts meant they couldn't pay suppliers or staff. The publicity from the evening's events, while vindicating Carolyn, had also exposed the restaurant's vulnerable financial position. In the aftermath of the charity gala confrontation, Ronald Clark found himself alone in his office, surrounded by financial statements and unpaid invoices. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him with physical force. Through the window, he watched his staff departing for the evening, each face bearing the strain of uncertainty. His internal conflict manifested in sleepless nights and endless second-guessing of every decision. The practical businessman in him recognized that the most logical course would be to accept defeat gracefully. He could sell the restaurant while it still held some value, ensure his staff received proper severance, and preserve enough capital to start something new. Yet another part of him, the part that remembered sleeping in doorways and scrounging for meals, rebelled against this pragmatic surrender. Carolyn's internal struggle centered on the burden of vindication. The exposure of Marcus's past actions had cleared her name but simultaneously highlighted the devastating impact she'd had on City Sanctuary. During quiet moments in the kitchen, she found herself calculating the cost of her presence not in dollars, but in dreams disrupted and careers jeopardized. The guilt sat heavily in her chest, even as she continued to create innovative dishes with increasingly limited resources. Her professional pride warred with her maternal instincts. Each morning she watched Rose help with prep work before school, the child's dedication both heartwarming and concerning. She questioned whether staying at City Sanctuary served her daughter's best interests, even as she recognized the sense of belonging Rose had found there. The conflict between providing stability and protecting her child's future kept her awake long into the night. Rose faced her own internal battles, more complex than most children her age should encounter. She overheard the staff's worried conversations about payroll and suppliers, understanding more than the adults realized. Her natural optimism clashed with growing awareness of adult realities. The simple joy she once found in creating her bracelets became complicated by the knowledge that each sale now contributed to essential expenses. The young girl struggled with feelings of responsibility far beyond her years. She began skipping lunch at school to save money, telling no one but carefully adding her lunch money to the jar where she kept her bracelet earnings. The internal conflict between wanting to help and knowing she couldn't really fix things manifested in quiet moments of overwhelming anxiety. David Chen's military training had prepared him for external threats, but offered little guidance for this type of battle. His instinct protect warred with his growing understanding that some threats couldn't be fought with security protocols and vigilance. The helplessness he felt watching the restaurant struggle challenged his fundamental identity as a protector. During his security rounds, he found himself making mental notes of which equipment might fetch decent resale prices, then feeling ashamed of such thoughts. His loyalty to Ronald clashed with his practical assessment of the situation, creating a constant state of internal tension. Maria discovered that her passion for pastry making now carried an edge of desperation. Each dessert she created needed to be not just excellent but extraordinary, working with increasingly limited ingredients. The creative challenge thrilled her professional pride while simultaneously exhausting her spirit. She found herself second-guessing every recipe, wondering if simpler offerings might better serve the restaurant's strained budget. William Clark's internal struggle centered on redemption. His newfound sobriety, motivated by the crisis, brought with it the clear-eyed recognition of his past failures. Each attempt to help his son carried the weight of decades of disappointment. The desire to make amends warred with the fear that his efforts might cause more harm than good, creating a paralysis that manifested in long hours spent staring at repair jobs he wasn't sure he could complete properly. Sister Margaret battled with the limits of faith and practicality. Her religious conviction told her that hope remained, while her experience with struggling businesses suggested otherwise. She found herself questioning whether continuing to encourage Carolyn and Rose to stay at City Sanctuary served them or merely prolonged their uncertainty. Her prayers became conversations with herself about the nature of help and harm. The remaining staff members each fought their own internal battles. Loyalty to the restaurant competed with practical needs as their paychecks became increasingly uncertain. They found themselves in the uncomfortable position of hoping for the restaurant's survival while quietly updating their resumes during breaks. The guilt these preparations engendered affected their performance, creating a cycle of declining standards and increasing self-doubt. James, recovering from his heart attack, struggled with feelings of uselessness as he read reports of the restaurant's wine collection being sold off to cover expenses. His expertise, once central to City Sanctuary's success, seemed irrelevant in the face of basic survival needs. The conflict between his desire to help and his physical limitations created a deep depression that hindered his recovery. Ronald's internal conflict reached its peak during quiet moments in the kitchen, where the rhythmic sounds of cooking provided a backdrop for deeper reflection. He questioned whether his stance on helping Carolyn and Rose had been compassionate or merely prideful. The line between standing up for one's principles and destructive stubbornness became increasingly blurred in his mind. The first devastating blow came on a quiet Monday morning when City Sanctuary staff arrived to find the restaurant's entrance vandalized. The elegant windows, which had showcased the dining room's warm ambience for years, lay shattered across the sidewalk. Inside, the damage was systematic and precise: wine bottles broken, expensive kitchen equipment destroyed, and the walls defaced with cruel messages targeting Carolyn and Rose. Insurance investigators arrived quickly but delivered disheartening news. The policy coverage had lapsed 3 days earlier due to a missed payment, a detail that had slipped through the cracks during their financial crisis. The timing suggested inside knowledge of their financial situation, though proving sabotage would be nearly impossible. The physical damage, while significant, paled in comparison to the deeper losses that followed. That same afternoon, the New York Restaurant Association revoked City Sanctuary's prestigious membership. The formal letter cited failure to maintain industry standards as the official reason, but Ronald recognized Marcus Stone's influence in the carefully worded dismissal. Carolyn suffered a personal loss that struck at her professional core. Her prized collection of original recipes, developed over decades and stored in a leather-bound journal, disappeared during the chaos of cleaning up the vandalism. These recipes represented not just her culinary legacy but also her planned contribution to rebuilding City Sanctuary's menu. The loss left her visibly shaken, her hands trembling as she tried to recreate recipes from memory. Rose's carefully organized bracelet-making station, set up in her corner of the restaurant, had been specifically targeted. Her supplies lay scattered and destroyed, many of the delicate materials deliberately ruined with cleaning chemicals. The destruction of her small business venture represented more than just monetary loss. It was an attack on her sense of contribution to the restaurant's survival. The restaurant's reputation, built over years of excellence, crumbled with shocking speed. Food critics who had once championed City Sanctuary now published retrospectives questioning whether its standards had ever been as high as they'd claimed. These articles, clearly orchestrated as part of a larger campaign, systematically undermined the restaurant's entire history. Financial losses mounted with brutal efficiency. Suppliers, responding to industry rumors, began demanding cash payments up front. Long-standing credit arrangements evaporated overnight. The restaurant's reserve funds, already depleted, couldn't sustain basic operations under these new terms. Essential ingredients became luxury items, forcing daily compromises in menu quality. The staff exodus began gradually but accelerated as the situation worsened. First to leave were the newer employees, then experienced servers who had been with the restaurant for years. Each departure weakened the restaurant's ability to maintain its standards, creating a downward spiral of declining service and further losses. David Chen discovered that his security company's license had been challenged, forcing him to reduce coverage at the restaurant. The timing coincided with an increase in suspicious activities around the property, suggesting a coordinated effort to make the restaurant vulnerable to further incidents. Maria's pastry kitchen suffered a particularly cruel blow when her specialized equipment malfunctioned simultaneously. Investigation revealed evidence of tampering, but proving deliberate sabotage would cost more in legal fees than replacing the equipment money they no longer had. The most significant loss came in the form of community support. Local businesses, once proud to be associated with City Sanctuary, began distancing themselves. The restaurant's mail contained increasingly frequent notices from neighbors' lawyers, citing various complaints and threatening legal action. William Clark, making progress in his recovery, suffered a devastating setback when anonymous sources sent documentation of his past failures to local news outlets. The resulting publicity painted Ronald's support of his father as another example of poor judgment, damaging both their reputations and their fragile reconciliation. Sister Margaret's church received pressure from influential donors to sever ties with City Sanctuary. The choice between supporting Carolyn and Rose or maintaining funding for other crucial community programs created an impossible dilemma for the organization. The accumulated losses reached a critical point when the building's owners served notice of early lease termination, citing an obscure clause in the contract. The legal notice gave City Sanctuary 30 days to vacate the premises, effectively signing the death warrant for the restaurant in its current form. Ronald's personal losses extended beyond the professional sphere. His apartment above the restaurant, once a symbol of his success, now served as a constant reminder of impending failure. Each morning, he woke to the sound of fewer staff arriving, fewer deliveries being made, fewer customers filling the dining room. These compounded losses created an atmosphere of impending doom that affected every aspect of the restaurant's operations. The elegant dining room, once filled with the gentle murmur of satisfied customers, now echoed with uncomfortable silences. The kitchen, previously alive with creative energy, operated in a state of constant anxiety about what might be lost next. In the darkest hour of City Sanctuary's crisis, a series of remarkable sacrifices emerged from unexpected quarters. The first came from Maria Suarez, who quietly sold her cherished collection of antique copper baking molds, accumulated over 2 decades of her career. The proceeds, while not enormous, provided enough to purchase essential supplies for the week's service. She presented the money to Ronald without fanfare, simply stating, "My grandmother taught me that tools are meant to be used, not collected. These will do more good as flour and sugar than gathering dust on my shelves." David Chen's sacrifice manifested through sheer physical endurance. After his security company's license was suspended, he began working double shifts, sleeping on a cot in the restaurant's office to maintain 24-hour surveillance. His military pension, originally saved for his daughter's college fund, was redirected to hire additional part-time security personnel during peak hours. When Ronald attempted to protest, David simply said, "Some battles must be fought on multiple fronts, sir." Carolyn made perhaps the most difficult sacrifice when she received an offer from a prestigious restaurant in Chicago. The position would have provided financial security and a fresh start for her and Rose, away from the controversy. Instead, she turned it down, knowing that her departure would be seen as an admission of guilt and would damage City Sanctuary's remaining reputation irreparably. She chose to stay and fight, even as this decision meant continuing to live in uncertainty. Rose's sacrifice touched the hearts of everyone at the restaurant. The young girl had been secretly saving her bracelet earnings in hopes of buying her mother a proper chef's coat for Christmas. Instead, she contributed her entire savings to help replace the vandalized kitchen equipment. She presented her savings jar to Ronald with simple dignity, saying, "Mum always says we're not really poor as long as we can help others." The remaining staff members demonstrated their loyalty through significant personal sacrifices. Senior servers volunteered to work for reduced wages, kitchen staff brought ingredients from their own homes, and everyone took on additional duties without complaint. They formed an informal network, sharing resources and supporting each other through the crisis. Sister Margaret faced severe criticism from her superiors when she pledged the church's basement as collateral for an emergency loan to City Sanctuary. Her action risked not only her position but also the shelter's future operations. Yet she remained steadfast, arguing that faith manifested through actions, not just prayers. William Clark made a sacrifice that surprised everyone, including himself. Having maintained sobriety for several weeks, he sold the only valuable possession he had left, his father's vintage carpentry tools, to contribute to the restaurant's repair fund. The sale of these family heirlooms, which he had kept through years of hardship, demonstrated a commitment to redemption that transcended mere words. James, still recovering from his heart attack, insisted on returning to work part-time without pay. Despite his doctor's warnings, he began offering weekly wine appreciation classes in the dining room, attracting a small but dedicated group of enthusiasts who provided much-needed regular income. His health suffered, but his expertise helped maintain a connection with the restaurant's wine-loving clientele. Ronald's personal sacrifice came in the form of his pride. He swallowed his reservations and reached out to former competitors for help, enduring their conditional offers and barely concealed satisfaction at his predicament. Each such meeting cost him emotionally, but he persevered for the sake of his staff and the principles he had chosen to defend. Local vendors who had long supplied City Sanctuary made their own sacrifices. The neighborhood florist continued delivering fresh flowers despite mounting unpaid bills, saying simply, "A restaurant without flowers is just a room with tables." The local linen service extended credit far beyond their usual terms, quietly absorbing the cost of maintaining the restaurant's standards. The most touching sacrifices came from unexpected sources. Regular customers began organizing informal fundraising events. Local culinary students volunteered their time to help in the kitchen. Even some of the homeless individuals whom Carolyn had helped in the past contributed by maintaining the cleanliness of the sidewalks around the restaurant. These collective sacrifices created a web of support that transcended mere financial assistance. Each act of giving strengthened the bonds between the restaurant's extended family, transforming City Sanctuary from a simple business into a symbol of community resilience. And the sacrifices, while painful, generated a form of wealth that couldn't be measured in monetary terms. The culmination of these sacrifices became evident during a particularly challenging evening service. With minimal staff and resources, the restaurant managed to serve a full dining room through sheer determination and coordinated effort. Every person involved, from Rose folding napkins to William Clark fixing a wobbly table, contributed to maintaining the standards that had made City Sanctuary special. At the end of that service, Ronald gathered his tired but proud team. Looking at their exhausted faces, he recognized that their sacrifices had created something extraordinary, a restaurant that survived not on luxury ingredients or exclusive clientele, but on the strength of human dignity and shared purpose. The true measure of humanity at City Sanctuary emerged during a severe winter storm that left much of the neighborhood without power. While other establishments closed their doors, Ronald Clark made a decision that would redefine the restaurant's purpose. He transformed the dining room into a temporary shelter, using the gas-powered kitchen to provide warm meals for displaced residents. Carolyn took charge of organizing the emergency food service, drawing on her experience of creating nourishing meals with limited resources. She established an efficient system that transformed the restaurant's remaining inventory into hearty soups and stews that could feed many. Her expertise in stretching ingredients, born from years of hardship, proved invaluable in this crisis. Rose demonstrated remarkable emotional intelligence during this period. She noticed how some of the displaced families felt uncomfortable accepting help from a fine dining establishment. In response, she began teaching children from these families how to make friendship bracelets, creating an activity that helped normalize their presence in the restaurant. This simple act transformed the atmosphere from one of emergency shelter to community gathering. The restaurant staff revealed their finest qualities during this crisis. David Chen organized sleeping arrangements in the dining room, using his military experience to maximize space while maintaining dignity for their temporary guests. Maria converted her pastry station into a hot chocolate bar for children, understanding that small comforts could make a significant difference in traumatic situations. William Clark found purpose in crisis management. His years of living on the streets had taught him survival skills that proved unexpectedly valuable. He knew how to maintain body heat with limited resources, how to prevent pipes from freezing, and how to identify signs of hypothermia. His knowledge, often dismissed in better times, became crucial for keeping people safe. The crisis brought out extraordinary gestures of kindness from unexpected sources. A rival restaurant, traditionally one of City Sanctuary's fiercest competitors, sent over their excess linens and blankets. Local food truck operators, many of whom had once viewed the restaurant as a symbol of elitism, parked outside to provide additional food service to the growing number of people seeking shelter. Sister Margaret coordinated with other religious organizations to provide additional support, creating a network of care that transcended denominational boundaries. The sight of different faith leaders working together in City Sanctuary's kitchen demonstrated how adversity could dissolve traditional divisions. The restaurant's regular customers showed their humanity in touching ways. Those who still had power in their homes came to volunteer, with businessmen in expensive suits working alongside homeless individuals to distribute meals. Social barriers dissolved in the face of shared purpose, creating unexpected connections and understanding. James, though still recovering, contributed by sharing stories from his decades in the restaurant industry, entertaining children and adults alike with tales of culinary adventures. His natural storytelling ability transformed anxious waiting times into moments of engagement and distraction from the crisis. The most profound display of humanity came from those who had the least to give. Homeless individuals who had previously received help from Carolyn now insisted on helping serve meals and clean up, demonstrating that dignity and the desire to contribute transcend economic circumstances. Rose's corner of the restaurant became a hub of emotional support. She organized a system where children could create art for their temporary sleeping spaces, helping them process their anxiety through creativity. Her intuitive understanding of how to make people feel at home, despite difficult circumstances, touched parents and children alike. Local suppliers, facing their own challenges during the storm, demonstrated remarkable generosity. A produce vendor whose truck was stranded nearby opened it for the restaurant's use, saying that food shouldn't go to waste when people were in need. This practical compassion helped sustain the impromptu shelter operation. The kitchen became a place where social distinctions melted away. Professional chefs worked alongside home cooks who had sought shelter, sharing techniques and stories. The simple act of preparing food together created bonds that transcended the temporary nature of their situation. These demonstrations of humanity had a lasting impact on City Sanctuary's identity. The crisis revealed that a restaurant could be more than a place of culinary excellence. It could serve as a vital community center where people from all walks of life found common ground and purpose. Ronald observed these interactions with growing understanding. The restaurant he had built to showcase culinary perfection had evolved into something more meaningful, a space where human dignity and compassion took precedence over social status and financial success. The truth emerged during an unexpected visit from a city building inspector, arriving late one evening after service. As the inspector meticulously examined City Sanctuary's premises, he discovered a hidden surveillance system installed throughout the restaurant's infrastructure. The cameras, professionally concealed within architectural details, had been recording every aspect of the restaurant's operations for months. Further investigation revealed that these devices were registered to a shell company connected to Marcus Stone's business empire. The documentation, uncovered through careful forensic accounting, showed a pattern of systematic surveillance dating back to when Carolyn first arrived at City Sanctuary. This discovery provided the first concrete evidence of a coordinated campaign against the restaurant. A more profound revelation came through an unlikely source. William Clark, during his regular maintenance rounds, found a sealed envelope hidden behind a loose panel in the wine cellar. The envelope contained photographs from 15 years ago, showing Marcus Stone meeting with the building inspector who had condemned Carolyn's original restaurant. The timestamps on these photos were dated just days before the mysterious fire that had destroyed her business. The most significant disclosure occurred when Rose, organizing her bracelet-making supplies in the restaurant's storage room, discovered an old accounting ledger that had fallen behind a shelf. The book, covered in dust, contained detailed records from Marcus Stone's family restaurant during the period of Carolyn's original downfall. The entries revealed suspicious payments to various officials and individuals connected to her restaurant's destruction. Carolyn's own moment of truth arrived through a letter forwarded by Sister Margaret. The envelope contained testimony from a former employee of Marcus Stone, written on their deathbed. The confession detailed how they had been paid to plant evidence suggesting financial misconduct at Carolyn's restaurant. The writer, seeking to clear their conscience, had entrusted the information to the church years ago. Ronald's revelation came through a series of emails accidentally forwarded to City Sanctuary's general account. The messages, intended for Marcus Stone's legal team, outlined a comprehensive strategy to manipulate health inspections and financial audits. The correspondence revealed that Ronald's own father had been unwittingly used as a pawn in this scheme, his appearances at the restaurant carefully orchestrated to create disruption. A crucial piece of evidence emerged when David Chen's security cameras captured a late-night meeting between Marcus Stone and several local business owners. The footage showed Stone explicitly threatening these individuals, demanding they withdraw their support from City Sanctuary. This video provided irrefutable proof of the coordinated effort to isolate the restaurant from its community. The full scope of Marcus Stone's vendetta became clear when Maria discovered altered recipes in the restaurant's computer system. Technical analysis revealed sophisticated tampering designed to gradually degrade the quality of City Sanctuary's signature dishes. This sabotage explained the subtle decline in food quality that had puzzled the kitchen staff for months. James, recovering in his hospital bed, received a visit from an old colleague who had worked at Marcus Stone's family restaurant decades ago. This former employee shared stories of how the Stone family had systematically eliminated competition throughout their rise to prominence, using similar tactics to those employed against Carolyn and City Sanctuary. The most damaging revelation came through an anonymous source within the restaurant association. Documents arrived showing how Marcus Stone had manipulated the organization's review process, ensuring that City Sanctuary's prestigious membership would be revoked regardless of their actual performance. This evidence exposed the systematic nature of the campaign against them. Sister Margaret's church archives yielded another crucial piece of evidence. Among old community records, she found documentation of similar patterns of harassment against other establishments that had challenged the Stone family's dominance in the restaurant industry. These historical records established a decades-long pattern of predatory business practices. The final piece of the puzzle emerged through Rose's perspective. Her careful observation of daily patterns in the restaurant led her to notice discrepancies in customer behavior. Several particularly difficult customers who had contributed to negative reviews were connected through social media to Marcus Stone's business interests. This discovery revealed the orchestrated nature of the restaurant's recent service complaints. These revelations, when assembled together, painted a clear picture of a calculated campaign to destroy not just City Sanctuary, but anyone who represented a challenge to Marcus Stone's vision of the restaurant industry. The truth provided both vindication and a new challenge how to use this information effectively without descending to the level of their adversaries. Ronald Clark's moment of self-realization came during a quiet evening in his office, reviewing the evidence of Marcus Stone's conspiracy. He recognized that his obsession with maintaining City Sanctuary's prestigious reputation had paradoxically led him away from the principles that had inspired its creation. His journey from homelessness to success had been fueled not by a desire for exclusivity, but by a vision of creating a place where food could transform lives. The weight of this understanding manifested in a profound shift in his perspective. Looking around his meticulously organized office, with its awards and accolades carefully displayed, Ronald suddenly saw these symbols of success differently. They represented not just personal achievement, but a responsibility to create opportunities for others, just as someone had once done for him. Carolyn's self-awareness emerged through her interactions with the younger kitchen staff. As she taught them her techniques for creating extraordinary meals from simple ingredients, she realized that her greatest professional achievements hadn't been her televised appearances or critical acclaim, but rather the moments when her food had brought comfort and dignity to others. Her identity as a chef had evolved beyond the narrow confines of fine dining into something more meaningful. The transformation in her self-image became evident in her approach to menu planning. Instead of trying to recreate the elaborate dishes of her past, she began developing new recipes that honored both culinary excellence and accessibility. This fusion of high-end technique with practical consideration reflected her own journey of self-discovery. Rose's growth in self-awareness surpassed what might be expected from someone her age. Through the crisis, she had discovered an innate ability to connect with people across social barriers. Her bracelet-making enterprise, which had begun as a simple way to earn money, revealed itself as a means of building bridges between different communities. She came to understand that her true gift lay not in the bracelets themselves, but in the connections they helped create. The young girl's perception of her own role in the restaurant deepened. She wasn't just a child who needed protection, but a vital part of the community that had formed around City Sanctuary. This understanding gave her a quiet confidence that transformed her interactions with both staff and customers. David Chen's military background had always defined his approach to his duties, but the recent events forced him to reconsider his role. He realized that true security involved more than physical protection. It required building trust and fostering a sense of community. His rigid military bearing softened as he embraced a more nuanced understanding of what it meant to keep people safe. This new self-awareness manifested in small but significant changes in his behavior. He began greeting regular customers by name, learning their stories, and understanding that relationships could be as effective as surveillance in creating a secure environment. Maria's journey of self-discovery centered around her relationship with food and creativity. The limitations imposed by their financial situation had initially seemed like constraints on her artistic expression. However, she came to understand that true creativity flourished not in abundance but in finding beauty within limitations. Her pastries evolved to reflect this philosophy, becoming simpler but more meaningful. William Clark's path to self-awareness proved particularly challenging. Confronting his role in Marcus Stone's manipulation forced him to acknowledge how his past actions had affected his son. Yet this painful recognition also opened the door to genuine change. He began to understand that redemption came not through grand gestures but through consistent, reliable presence and support. Sister Margaret's involvement with City Sanctuary led her to a deeper understanding of her own mission. She recognized that true charity went beyond providing basic necessities. It required creating opportunities for people to maintain their dignity and contribute to their community. This insight influenced how she approached her work at the shelter, integrating principles of empowerment alongside assistance. James, from his hospital bed, reached a new understanding of his life's work. His expertise in wine, which had once served primarily to enhance the dining experience of wealthy patrons, found new purpose in education and community building. He began planning wine appreciation classes that would make this knowledge accessible to a broader audience. The restaurant's staff collectively experienced a shift in how they viewed their professional identities. They came to understand that excellence in hospitality extended beyond perfect service and elegant presentations. It encompassed creating an environment where every person, regardless of their circumstances, could experience the dignity of being welcomed and valued. This evolution in self-awareness transformed the very nature of City Sanctuary. The restaurant began to embody a new kind of excellence, one that measured success not just in critical acclaim or financial metrics, but in the strength of the communities it helped build and the lives it helped transform. The fundamental shift in perspective at City Sanctuary began with a reimagining of the restaurant's physical space. Ronald Clark, standing in the dining room early one morning, saw the elegant setting through new eyes. The carefully arranged tables, once positioned to maximize exclusivity, were rearranged to encourage community interaction. The former VIP section transformed into a flexible space where Rose could conduct her bracelet-making workshops alongside James's wine education classes. The restaurant's approach to service underwent a significant evolution. The traditional hierarchy of fine dining gave way to a more collaborative model. Carolyn introduced a rotating system where staff members alternated between front and back of house positions, fostering greater understanding and respect across roles. This change eliminated the invisible barriers that had long separated different aspects of restaurant operations. The menu itself reflected this philosophical transformation. Rather than maintaining separate lunch and dinner offerings, City Sanctuary developed a unified menu that adapted throughout the day to serve different community needs. Morning hours featured affordable breakfast options for local workers, while evening service retained elements of fine dining but with more accessible price points and portion sizes. The restaurant's relationship with suppliers evolved into true partnerships. Instead of simply placing orders, City Sanctuary began collaborating with local farmers and vendors to plan seasonal offerings. This approach not only reduced costs but created a more sustainable supply chain that benefited the entire community. Suppliers became regular visitors, often sharing meals with staff and contributing their expertise to menu planning. The definition of success underwent a profound reassessment. Rather than measuring achievements solely through reviews and revenue, City Sanctuary developed new metrics that included community impact, employee satisfaction, and accessibility. Financial sustainability remained important, but it became one factor among many rather than the primary focus. The restaurant's role in the neighborhood expanded beyond food service. The kitchen began hosting cooking classes for local families, teaching techniques for creating nutritious meals on limited budgets. These sessions, led by Carolyn, combined professional expertise with practical wisdom gained through personal experience. The classes became a bridge between different segments of the community, creating connections through shared learning. David Chen's security protocols evolved to emphasize community engagement over surveillance. His morning rounds now included conversations with neighboring businesses and residents, building a network of mutual support and awareness. This shift from defensive security to proactive community building strengthened the restaurant's position in ways that cameras and alarms never could. Maria's pastry department pioneered a new approach to luxury in dining. Instead of focusing on expensive ingredients and elaborate presentations, she developed techniques for creating memorable desserts using seasonal and accessible components. Her creations demonstrated that extraordinary experiences could emerge from simple, honest ingredients prepared with care and creativity. The restaurant's interaction with homeless individuals transformed completely. Rather than viewing them as a challenge to be managed, City Sanctuary developed programs that provided dignified employment opportunities. The success of these initiatives challenged long-held assumptions about capability and worth, inspiring other businesses to reconsider their own hiring practices. William Clark's perspective on his role in his son's life underwent a remarkable shift. Instead of seeking dramatic gestures of redemption, he focused on consistent, reliable support through daily maintenance work at the restaurant. His steady presence and quiet competence began rebuilding trust in ways that words alone never could. The restaurant's approach to training evolved beyond traditional culinary education. New staff members received instruction not just in food preparation and service techniques, but in community engagement and social awareness. This holistic approach to professional development created employees who were both skilled practitioners and engaged community members. Rose's corner of the restaurant became a model for how business and social purpose could align. Her bracelet-making enterprise expanded into a small business incubator, where other young entrepreneurs could develop their ideas with support from the restaurant's network. This initiative demonstrated how commercial success could coexist with social impact. The restaurant's relationship with critics and food media underwent a fundamental change. Instead of pursuing traditional reviews and ratings, City Sanctuary began sharing stories of community transformation through food. These narratives resonated with a growing audience interested in the intersection of culinary excellence and social responsibility. Sister Margaret's perspective on the relationship between charity and dignity evolved through her continued involvement with the restaurant. She recognized that sustainable change required creating opportunities for people to contribute their talents and skills, not just receive assistance. This understanding influenced how both the shelter and the restaurant approached their community work. The transformation in perspective ultimately extended beyond City Sanctuary to influence the broader restaurant industry. Other establishments began examining their own practices and relationships with their communities, recognizing that success could be measured in multiple ways. The restaurant became a case study in how businesses could adapt to serve both commercial and social purposes while maintaining high standards of quality. The process of reconciliation at City Sanctuary began with a formal gathering in the main dining room, orchestrated by Sister Margaret. She had convinced all key parties, including Marcus Stone, to attend what she termed a community restoration meeting. The elegant space, usually arranged for fine dining, was set up in a circular configuration that eliminated hierarchical positioning and encouraged direct dialogue. Ronald Clark initiated the conversation by acknowledging his own role in perpetuating an exclusive atmosphere that had sometimes alienated the surrounding community. His candid admission about how his fear of returning to poverty had influenced his business decisions resonated with unexpected depth. Even Marcus Stone, seated stiffly across the circle, showed a flicker of recognition at this vulnerability. The breakthrough moment came when Carolyn Thompson presented a detailed account of her journey, supported by the recently discovered evidence. Her narrative, delivered with professional composure, transformed the understanding of events that had led to her original restaurant's downfall. The documentation provided clarity without accusation, allowing Marcus Stone to acknowledge his family's historical practices without losing face. Rose's contribution to the reconciliation process proved unexpectedly powerful. She presented each participant with one of her handmade bracelets, each design thoughtfully incorporating elements of their individual stories. Her simple gesture of creating connections through craft demonstrated the possibility of building bridges across deep divides. The neighborhood business owners, many of whom had withdrawn support from City Sanctuary during its difficulties, began sharing their own experiences of pressure and manipulation. These revelations created a common ground of understanding, as each participant recognized their part in a larger system that had prioritized competition over community. William Clark's testimony about his unwitting role in Marcus Stone's schemes provided a crucial perspective on how vulnerability could be exploited. His honest account of how alcoholism and desperation had made him susceptible to manipulation encouraged others to examine their own choices with similar candor. Marcus Stone's defensive posture began to shift as he listened to these accounts. The accumulated weight of evidence, combined with the dignified way it was presented, made maintaining his position of antagonism increasingly difficult. His initial attempts at justification gradually gave way to reluctant acknowledgement of the harm his actions had caused. The restaurant staff contributed their perspectives on how the conflict had affected daily operations and community relationships. Their accounts highlighted the human cost of business rivalries, demonstrating how competitive tactics impacted not just business owners but entire networks of employees and their families. David Chen provided insights from his security work, showing how fear and mistrust had created barriers within the neighborhood. His analysis of how these divisions had made the entire community more vulnerable helped participants understand the broader implications of their conflicts. Maria shared how the crisis had forced innovation in her pastry kitchen, leading to discoveries about creating excellence with limited resources. Her experience illustrated how adversity could drive positive change, offering a constructive framework for viewing past conflicts. The reconciliation process gained momentum when local suppliers began discussing how the restaurant industry's competitive practices had affected their businesses. Their stories revealed the interconnected nature of the community's economic health, demonstrating how antagonistic business practices ultimately harmed all participants. Sister Margaret guided the conversation toward practical solutions, encouraging participants to move beyond acknowledgement toward active restoration. Her experience in community building helped transform individual insights into collective commitments for change. James, participating through video call from his hospital bed, offered historical perspective on how the restaurant industry had evolved in the city. His knowledge helped participants understand how current conflicts reflected larger patterns that could be consciously changed. The meeting concluded with the establishment of a neighborhood restaurant coalition designed to promote cooperation rather than destructive competition. This practical outcome provided a structure for implementing the insights gained through the reconciliation process. As the gathering dispersed, the physical space of City Sanctuary seemed transformed by the conversations that had taken place within it. The restaurant had become not just a venue for fine dining, but a space where genuine community restoration could occur. The process of rebuilding trust at City Sanctuary began with small but significant gestures. Ronald Clark initiated a weekly community dinner where local restaurant owners, including Marcus Stone, gathered to share meals and discuss industry challenges. These dinners, held in City Sanctuary's private dining room, established neutral ground where former adversaries could interact without pressure. The restoration of professional relationships started in the kitchen. Carolyn Thompson opened her morning prep sessions to staff from other restaurants, sharing her expertise in creating exceptional dishes with limited resources. This generosity gradually transformed industry skepticism into respect, as her innovative approaches demonstrated the value of collaborative learning over competitive secrecy. Marcus Stone's participation in rebuilding trust manifested through practical actions. He began by providing access to his restaurant's supplier network, helping City Sanctuary restore its inventory during critical shortages. This tangible support, offered without fanfare or conditions, marked a significant shift from previous antagonism to cautious cooperation. The rebuilding of community confidence accelerated when City Sanctuary and Guilt jointly launched a neighborhood restaurant initiative. The program, coordinated through Sister Margaret's Church, provided culinary training and employment opportunities for local residents. This collaboration demonstrated a new model of industry leadership focused on community development rather than competition. Rose's contribution to trust building emerged through her expanded bracelet-making workshops. These sessions now included children from across the socioeconomic spectrum, creating a space where barriers between different community segments naturally dissolved. Parents who attended these workshops often found themselves engaging in meaningful conversations that extended beyond the crafting table. William Clark's steady presence at the restaurant became a visible symbol of personal reformation. His reliable maintenance work and sustained sobriety encouraged others to believe in the possibility of genuine change. Regular customers who had witnessed his previous struggles now greeted him with respect, acknowledging his contribution to the restaurant's operations. The restoration of financial trust proceeded methodically. Ronald established transparent accounting practices, sharing monthly financial reports with staff and community stakeholders. This openness, though unconventional in the industry, created a foundation of confidence that attracted new investors who appreciated the emphasis on accountability. David Chen's security protocols evolved to incorporate trust-building measures. He established a neighborhood watch program that included both businesses and residents, transforming security from an individual concern into a community responsibility. This collaborative approach strengthened local relationships while improving safety for all participants. Maria's Pastry Kitchen became a hub for rebuilding professional trust. She initiated a dessert development program where pastry chefs from different restaurants could collaborate on seasonal offerings. This shared creative space fostered connections that transcended traditional competitive boundaries. The process of rebuilding trust extended to suppliers and vendors. City Sanctuary organized regular meetings where local suppliers could discuss challenges and opportunities with restaurant owners. These forums created transparency in pricing and availability, reducing suspicion and fostering more stable business relationships. James, continuing his recovery, contributed to trust building through his wine education programs. These sessions now included staff from multiple restaurants, creating opportunities for professional networking and knowledge sharing. His expertise provided common ground where individuals from formerly antagonistic establishments could interact constructively. Sister Margaret's role in rebuilding trust focused on sustainable community integration. She developed programs that connected restaurant resources with community needs, ensuring that business success translated into neighborhood improvement. This systematic approach to community benefit helped restore faith in the possibility of ethical business practices. The rebuilding of public trust progressed through consistent demonstration of new priorities. City Sanctuary maintained its commitment to accessible pricing while upholding quality standards, proving that inclusivity and excellence could coexist. This balance attracted positive attention from industry observers and food critics who had previously been skeptical. Local business associations, initially hesitant to re-engage with City Sanctuary, gradually restored their relationships as evidence of positive change accumulated. The restaurant's new approach to community engagement provided a model that other establishments began to emulate, creating a ripple effect of improved business practices throughout the neighborhood. The restoration of trust culminated in a transformation of industry relationships. But the competitive dynamics that had previously dominated local restaurant interactions evolved into a more collaborative model, where success was measured not just by individual achievement but by collective community impact. The full acceptance of City Sanctuary's transformed identity manifested during the restaurant's annual autumn gathering. The event, traditionally an exclusive celebration for wealthy patrons, evolved into a community festival that filled the entire street. Long tables stretched from the restaurant's entrance to the neighborhood park, bringing together guests from every segment of society in a shared celebration of food and community. Carolyn Thompson's role in the kitchen exemplified this new integration. She orchestrated a menu that married refined culinary techniques with accessible ingredients, creating dishes that honored both her professional training and her experiences with food insecurity. The service received acclaim not just for its technical excellence, but for its ability to make every guest feel equally valued. Marcus Stone's participation marked a significant milestone in community acceptance. He contributed Guild's resources to the celebration, working alongside his former rivals to create an event that emphasized collaboration over competition. His public acknowledgement of past mistakes, delivered without pretense during the evening speeches, demonstrated genuine change rather than mere compliance. Ronald Clark's evolution became evident in his approach to hospitality. Rather than managing the event from behind the scenes, he actively engaged with guests from all backgrounds, sharing stories of the restaurant's journey with transparency and humility. His comfortable interaction with both wealthy patrons and homeless community members showed authentic acceptance of the restaurant's broader social role. Rose's contribution to the celebration reflected her growing understanding of community building. She organized a group of children from diverse backgrounds to create decorations for the event, ensuring that the festival's appearance represented the entire community's creativity. Their collaborative art installations transformed the street into a space where everyone could recognize their contribution. The staff's adaptation to this new reality showed in their natural handling of the diverse crowd. Service standards remained high but became more flexible and responsive to individual needs. The previous rigid formality gave way to genuine warmth, creating an atmosphere where all guests felt comfortable regardless of their familiarity with fine dining protocols. William Clark found his place within this integrated community. His maintenance work, once seen as peripheral to the restaurant's operation, became recognized as essential to creating a welcoming environment. Regular guests knew him by name, and his steady presence added to the sense of stability and continuity that defined the new city sanctuary. David Chen's security approach reflected complete acceptance of the restaurant's evolved mission. His team maintained professional standards while operating with a community-oriented mindset that prioritized inclusion over exclusion. Their presence provided reassurance without creating barriers, demonstrating how safety and accessibility could coexist. Maria's dessert service embodied the principle of accessible excellence. She developed a menu that offered sophisticated options alongside simple pleasures, ensuring that every guest could find something to celebrate. Her creative use of ingredients proved that culinary artistry could flourish within constraints that promoted inclusion. The local business community's acceptance manifested through practical cooperation. Neighboring establishments coordinated their services to complement, rather than compete with City Sanctuary's offerings. This collaborative approach strengthened the entire neighborhood's economic health, while preserving each business's unique identity. Sister Margaret's role evolved from advocate to partner as the restaurant fully embraced its community mission. The boundary between City Sanctuary's commercial operation and her social service work became increasingly fluid, creating a model for how businesses could integrate profit and purpose. The acceptance of change extended to the restaurant's economic model. Investors recognized that City Sanctuary's approach, while unconventional, created sustainable value through strong community relationships and loyal customer base. This financial validation proved that social responsibility could coexist with business success. James's wine program exemplified the successful integration of excellence and accessibility. He developed a selection that included both prestigious labels and carefully chosen affordable options, presenting each with equal respect and enthusiasm. His approach demonstrated how expertise could be shared without compromising standards or excluding participants. The media's coverage of City Sanctuary shifted from skepticism to recognition of its pioneering role in redefining restaurant culture. Industry publications highlighted how the establishment had successfully challenged traditional assumptions about fine dining's relationship with community service. The final evidence of acceptance appeared in the natural way different groups interacted within the restaurant's space. social barriers that had once seemed insurmountable dissolved through regular contact and shared experiences. City Sanctuary became a place where genuine community could flourish, proving that transformation was possible through persistent commitment to inclusive values. The resolution of City Sanctuary's primary conflict crystallized during an unprecedented joint announcement by Ronald Clark and Marcus Stone in the restaurant's main dining room. The two restaurateurs, once bitter rivals, stood together before an assembled crowd of industry leaders, community members, and media representatives to present their vision for transforming the local restaurant industry. Marcus Stone began by publicly acknowledging his role in the systematic campaign against both City Sanctuary and Carolyn Thompson. His admission, delivered with uncharacteristic humility, included a detailed account of how his family's business practices had prioritized dominance over community well-being. He announced the establishment of a substantial restoration fund designed to compensate those who had suffered from his past actions. The formal resolution included the creation of the New York Restaurant Community Alliance, a groundbreaking partnership between City Sanctuary and Gilt. This organization, with Ronald and Marcus serving as co-chairs, established clear guidelines for ethical business practices within the industry. The Alliance's first initiative focused on creating employment opportunities for individuals facing barriers to traditional restaurant careers. Carolyn Thompson's vindication became complete when the Restaurant Association formally cleared her name. The organization's investigation, prompted by the evidence of Marcus's manipulation, resulted in the restoration of her professional credentials and a public apology for their role in perpetuating false accusations. This official recognition allowed her to fully resume her position as City Sanctuary's executive chef. The resolution extended beyond professional rehabilitation to address systemic issues. The Alliance implemented a neighborhood development program that ensured local restaurants contributed to community stability rather than driving displacement. This initiative included rent stabilization agreements for small businesses and residents, protecting the area's diverse character while allowing for sustainable growth. Rose's role in the resolution manifested through the establishment of the Young Entrepreneurs Program. This initiative, funded jointly by City Sanctuary and Gilt, provided mentorship and resources for young people interested in combining business success with social impact. Rose's bracelet-making enterprise became the program's first success story, demonstrating its potential for fostering both commercial and social value. The financial aspects of the resolution included a restructuring of City Sanctuary's ownership model. Marcus Stone's Restoration Fund provided capital for the restaurant to transition to a community ownership structure, with shares distributed among staff members and local residents. This transformation ensured that the restaurant's future would remain aligned with community interests. But William Clark's contribution to the resolution came through his establishment of a maintenance training program. Working with local vocational schools, he developed a curriculum that combined technical skills with the principles of community service. This program created a pipeline of skilled workers while providing opportunities for individuals recovering from addiction and homelessness. The resolution of security concerns took shape through David Chen's comprehensive community safety initiative. The program integrated traditional security measures with community engagement strategies, creating a model for how businesses could contribute to neighborhood stability without resorting to exclusionary practices. Sister Margaret's role in the resolution focused on establishing permanent links between commercial success and social responsibility. The church's partnership with the Restaurant Alliance ensured that community needs remained central to business planning, while providing accountability for social impact commitments. The culinary aspects of the resolution manifested in a revolutionary approach to menu planning and pricing. City Sanctuary introduced a flexible pricing system that maintained high standards while ensuring accessibility across income levels. This model, soon adopted by other Alliance members, demonstrated how restaurants could serve diverse communities without compromising quality. James's contribution to the resolution included the development of an industry education program that democratized access to wine and culinary knowledge. His curriculum, designed to bridge social and economic divisions, became a mandatory component of professional certification within the Alliance. Maria's pastry program emerged as a key element in the resolution's implementation. Her innovative approaches to creating exceptional desserts with accessible ingredients became a case study in how culinary excellence could adapt to serve broader community needs. Her methods were incorporated into the Alliance's training programs, influencing a new generation of pastry chefs. The formal resolution culminated in the establishment of an annual community festival, combining the culinary expertise of local restaurants with celebration of neighborhood diversity. This event, hosted jointly by City Sanctuary and Guild, symbolized the transformation of industry competition into collaboration for community benefit. The resolution's success became evident in the changing character of the neighborhood. The fear of displacement gave way to confidence in sustainable development, while the restaurant industry's role evolved from a driver of gentrification to a force for community stability. Ronald Clark's transformation manifested in both subtle and profound ways. His previous definition of success, measured primarily through critical acclaim and profit margins, evolved into a more nuanced understanding of value creation. He maintained his exacting standards while developing a leadership style that emphasized mentorship over authority. In management meetings, his colleagues noted how he now listened more than he spoke, seeking input from all levels of staff before making decisions. The most significant evidence of his growth appeared in his approach to new challenges. When a competing restaurant faced financial difficulties, Ronald offered support and guidance, rather than viewing their situation as a business opportunity. His reputation in the industry shifted from that of a successful but isolated figure to a respected community leader who helped elevate the entire culinary landscape. Carolyn Thompson's development extended beyond professional rehabilitation. Her experience of losing and regaining her career transformed her approach to culinary education. She established a comprehensive training program that combined technical excellence with emotional intelligence, preparing students not just to cook but to create inclusive environments in their own kitchens. Her leadership style evolved to emphasize collaboration over hierarchy, drawing out the unique strengths of each team member. The most profound aspect of Carolyn's growth appeared in her willingness to share her story openly. She transformed her past struggles into teaching moments, helping others understand how adversity could become a source of strength. Her relationship with her staff deepened as she created an environment where vulnerability was seen as an asset rather than a weakness. Rose's development surpassed expectations for someone her age. Her bracelet-making enterprise evolved from a survival mechanism into a sophisticated social enterprise. She developed business acumen while maintaining her natural empathy, creating a model for young entrepreneurs to follow. Her presence in the restaurant became inspirational as she demonstrated how youth and wisdom could coexist. The maturity of her growth showed in how she handled her increasing influence. Rather than becoming isolated by her success, she actively sought ways to share opportunities with other young people facing similar challenges. Her weekly workshops became incubators for new business ideas, fostering a network of young social entrepreneurs. Marcus Stone's transformation proved particularly remarkable. His journey from ruthless competitor to community advocate demonstrated genuine character development. He learned to measure success not through market dominance but through positive impact. His business practices shifted dramatically as he implemented ethical guidelines that prioritized community stability over rapid expansion. The depth of his change manifested in his mentoring of young restaurateurs. Rather than viewing new establishments as threats, he provided guidance and support to ensure their sustainable growth. His public acknowledgement of past mistakes became a powerful example of how industry leaders could champion positive change. William Clark's growth centered on his commitment to sobriety and responsibility. His role in the restaurant's maintenance program gave him a sense of purpose that strengthened his recovery. He developed patience in teaching others, finding satisfaction in passing on his skills rather than seeking recognition. His relationship with Ronald evolved from a source of tension to a collaborative partnership. The most significant indicator of William's development appeared in his consistent presence. He became known for his reliability, transforming his image from that of a cautionary tale to a symbol of successful rehabilitation. His open discussions about addiction and recovery helped others facing similar challenges seek help. David Chen's growth extended beyond his security expertise. He developed a comprehensive understanding of how physical safety interconnected with community well-being. His security protocols evolved to incorporate social awareness and cultural sensitivity. He became skilled at de-escalating situations through communication rather than confrontation. The evolution of his character showed in his approach to training new staff. He emphasized the importance of building relationships within the community, teaching security personnel to serve as community liaisons rather than just guards. His department became a model for how security could contribute to social cohesion. Maria's development as a pastry chef reflected deeper personal growth. She learned to balance creative ambition with practical constraints, finding innovative ways to make sophisticated desserts accessible to all customers. Her leadership style in the pastry kitchen emphasized teaching and experimentation, encouraging her team to develop their own creative voices. Sister Margaret's role evolved from that of an external supporter to an integral part of the restaurant's identity. She developed new approaches to combining social service with business operations, creating sustainable models for community development. Her influence extended beyond immediate assistance to shape long-term policy decisions in the industry. The collective growth of the staff reflected in their increased ownership of the restaurant's mission. They moved beyond simply performing their duties to actively participating in the restaurant's evolution. Their professional development integrated technical skills with social awareness, creating a new standard for industry excellence. The humanitarian message of City Sanctuary crystallized during its first anniversary celebration as a community-owned establishment. The evening began with a remarkable scene. Local business owners, former homeless individuals, and longtime patrons all gathered together, sharing meals and conversation as equals. This gathering demonstrated how a restaurant could transcend its traditional role to become a catalyst for social transformation. The impact of the restaurant's journey manifested in tangible changes throughout the neighborhood. Other businesses began adopting similar inclusive practices, recognizing that commercial success and social responsibility could coexist harmoniously. The Restaurant Community Alliance reported that member establishments implementing City Sanctuary's model showed improved customer loyalty and staff retention while maintaining profitability. Ronald Clark's leadership philosophy became a case study in ethical business practices. His experience proved that maintaining high standards need not conflict with creating accessible opportunities. The training programs he developed with Carolyn Thompson served as templates for other restaurants seeking to balance excellence with inclusivity. Their approach demonstrated how professional kitchens could serve as vehicles for social mobility while upholding culinary standards. The transformation of Rose's Bracelet Enterprise into a youth entrepreneurship program illustrated the powerful ripple effects of supporting young talent. The program expanded beyond crafting to include culinary arts, business management, and community development. Participants learned that success could be measured not just in profit margins but in positive social impact. Their achievements challenged conventional assumptions about age, background, and capability. Marcus Stone's evolution from antagonist to advocate powerfully demonstrated the possibility of genuine change. His public acknowledgement of past wrongdoing, coupled with concrete actions to make amends, created a blueprint for corporate responsibility. The restoration fund he established helped numerous small businesses recover from predatory practices, proving that accountability could lead to positive industry transformation. The restaurant's flexible pricing model revealed how financial barriers to fine dining could be addressed creatively. By implementing a system where customers could pay according to their means, City Sanctuary maintained its high standards while ensuring accessibility. This approach proved that excellence and inclusivity could coexist, challenging industry assumptions about the relationship between exclusivity and quality. Sister Margaret's integration of social services with business operations demonstrated the practical application of humanitarian principles. Her methodology showed how commercial enterprises could address community needs while maintaining financial sustainability. The success of this model inspired other businesses to explore similar partnerships with social service organizations. The community ownership structure of City Sanctuary provided evidence that alternative business models could succeed in the competitive restaurant industry. Regular financial reports showed strong performance metrics while maintaining commitment to social impact. This data convinced skeptics that profitability and social responsibility could reinforce rather than undermine each other. William Clark's maintenance training program illustrated how skill development could support personal rehabilitation. The success of his students in securing stable employment demonstrated the value of providing second chances. But their stories of recovery and professional growth inspired other businesses to create similar opportunities for individuals rebuilding their lives. The evolution of the restaurant security approach under David Chen's leadership showed how safety and inclusivity could complement each other. His community-based security model reduced incidents while increasing neighborhood engagement. This success challenged conventional wisdom about the relationship between exclusivity and security in upscale establishments. Maria's innovations in the pastry kitchen proved that creativity could flourish within constraints. Her methods for creating exceptional desserts with accessible ingredients demonstrated how technical excellence could serve broader community needs. The success of her approach influenced industry standards for combining quality with accessibility. The documentary evidence of City Sanctuary's transformation, carefully compiled by James, provided a roadmap for other establishments seeking similar change. His detailed records of the restaurant's journey, including both successes and setbacks, offered practical guidance for implementing humanitarian business practices. The lasting message of City Sanctuary's story emerged in the daily interactions between staff and guests from all walks of life. The restaurant became a living example of how shared meals could bridge social divides and create genuine community connections. Its success demonstrated that commercial enterprises could serve as powerful agents of positive social change while maintaining high professional standards. The humanitarian impact extended beyond the immediate neighborhood as other restaurants began adopting similar practices. The model proved replicable in different contexts, showing how local businesses could contribute to community stability and social mobility. This broader influence suggested that individual acts of corporate responsibility could catalyze systemic change. The final measure of success appeared in the changed lives of community members who found opportunities through City Sanctuary's programs. Their stories of personal and professional growth provided compelling evidence that businesses could serve as platforms for social transformation while maintaining commercial viability. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this story of transformation at City Sanctuary. What resonated most with you? Was it Ronald's journey from skepticism to acceptance, Carolyn's path to redemption, or Rose's inspiring impact on the community? Share your perspective on how businesses can balance profit with social responsibility while maintaining excellence. If you found value in this narrative of hope and community building, consider subscribing to our channel. We're committed to bringing you more inspiring stories that challenge conventional thinking about business and social impact. Enable notifications to join us on this journey of discovering how small acts of kindness can transform communities. Your support helps spread these important messages of inclusion and positive change. By sharing this story with others, you become part of a larger movement that believes in the power of business to create meaningful social impact. Help us inspire more leaders to consider how their organizations can serve both commercial success and community well-being. Explore our channel for more stories about community transformation, ethical business practices, and the impact of inclusive leadership. Join us in celebrating how ordinary people can create extraordinary change when they choose to prioritize both excellence and compassion. Together we can build a more inclusive and supportive business community